Asen was speechless. This is bulletproof glass, you idiot. If you want out so badly, let's move to an open space for some fresh air. As soon as the car door was unlocked, Jung Hyun sprinted away, heading straight for the police station. In his rush, he stopped to flip the middle finger at Accent, shouting, "I'm going to the police, you dog. It's all on camera, even with your hat, you're finished." While cursing, he realized he needed to run faster and resumed his escape. Accent sighed. Looks like he's been practicing kickboxing. Let's leave him a little memento for those legs. He raised his axe high and threw it. The axe hit its mark, embedding itself in Jung Hyun's buttocks, causing him to fall to the ground, screaming for help. Asen, annoyed by the noise, kicked him hard, telling him, "It's best if you stay away from that street and erase Hajin from your mind. Got it? If I hear otherwise, I'll make sure you disappear without a trace, or you'll be begging me to end your misery." Jung Hyun, terrified and in tears, promised he'd completely forget about Hajin. Asen, standing up, stomped on Jung Hyun's face one last time. "Don't ever forget this day." Jung Hyun, covered in wounds, cursed under his breath, wondering why Hajin had so many protectors. Suddenly, he noticed a girl leaning against the wall. Seeing his condition, she approached and asked about his injuries. He pushed her away, snapping, "Lee, mind your own business." Lee, upset, retorted, "You're skipping more and more classes. Are you using your martial arts for evil?" Jung Hyun shouted back, "You talk too much. Just do your job as a teacher and stop meddling in my affairs." He pointed a finger at her face. "You ask if I'm using my skills for bad things? Well, those bad things are very useful for people like us." Lee felt disheartened, having tried her best. Jung Hyun, frustrated, raised his hand to slap her, yelling, "Stop crying, you nuisance." Suddenly, his arm was grabbed. Sejun intervened, saying, "If you don't know how to control this hand, I'll make it useless for you." Jung Hyun turned around, recognizing Sejun and questioning how he found this place, suspecting Lee had led him there. Lee hesitated but explained that Sejun claimed to be a friend of his, and since Jung Hyun hadn't been attending school, she brought him here. Jung Hyun yelled, "Friend? Are you stupid?" To shut him up, Sejun punched the swollen bump on Jung Hyun's forehead, flattening it. Jung Hyun rolled on the ground in pain, and Sejun remarked, "Idiots like you need a beating to learn." Lee, seeing something amiss, grabbed Sejun's sleeve, asking, "Aren't you Jung Hyun's friend?" Sejun apologized for lying and said, "He won't listen to you, no matter how much you help him. He's chosen to continue down this criminal path." Lee tried to convince Sejun that violence wasn't the answer. Sejun understood her stance, but explained that everyone has different perspectives. Victims live in constant fear, while bullies don't hesitate to find new ways to torment others. Therefore, he had no qualms about finding new ways to deal with them. "This is my choice." Jung Hyun, desperate, attempted to negotiate. "My condition isn't good now. Can we meet another day?" Sejun cared to ask, "Are you feeling any better?" He gleefully replied, "I just returned from the hospital." Sejun sighed deeply and acknowledged this unexpected opportunity, thanking his stars. Infuriated, Jung Hyun shouted, "Even if you defeat Tao in this condition, you're still a coward. Bring on Tao's brutal punches." Sejun remained calm, seeking openings. Swiftly, he dodged a sudden punch aimed at his ribs. Jung Hyun recoiled in surprise. Why does he seem more skilled than before? Has he been learning boxing? Despite this, if Jung Hyun managed to land a blow, Sejun would be defenseless. The pain from his hip wound surged suddenly, akin to a sharp, unexpected hemorrhoid pain. Just as he was about to collapse, Sejun leaped up, landing a direct punch to Jung Hyun's mouth and pressing him down to the ground. Sejun declared firmly for the second time, "I won't let you harm Hajin anymore." Just as he was about to deliver the final blow, Lee suddenly rushed in to shield Jung Hyun. Sejun remained composed, advising her to step aside. "He doesn't deserve protection like this." Lee turned back tearfully, pleading, "If he's at fault, let the law handle it. Please stop here." Sejun felt powerless. Everyone knew she was right, but the situation didn't allow for it. Jung Hyun laughed cynically as he was beaten badly. You guys are like actors in a saintly role, he mocked. Immediately after, he kicked Lee towards the wall. Stop pretending to care, old lady. Lee's head hit the wall hard. Sejun rushed over, finding blood everywhere. He quickly called for an ambulance. At that moment, Jung Hyun found a stick somewhere and approached from behind. He struck Sejun forcefully on the head, showing contempt. Trying to play the hero won't save you, you miserable fool, he shouted, continuously kicking Sejun. His hatred grew from seeing others live comfortably, thinking highly of themselves from good families. That woman is a hypocrite. She didn't lift a finger when I needed help, then pretends to care and advise. Sejun, could someone understand him? It was his insecurity and self-doubt. But Jung Hyun's dark energy subdued. Do you think you're the victim and the world owes you? Sejun retorted. They owe you nothing. Jung Hyun persisted in arguing. If you were in Tao's situation, Sejun bluntly exposed, this world lacks people in your situation. But they don't behave like you. No. Jung Hyun disagreed. There will always be people striving to improve, unlike you, who resort to violence for self-satisfaction. Trash like you is a failure. Jung Hyun was taken aback. You don't understand anything, he muttered. As he threw a punch, Sejun blocked it with his elbow. The impact was enough to fracture 3 of Jung Hyun's fingers. Sejun grabbed his hand. Regardless, I thank you for showing me that you're irredeemably vile, Sejun asserted. So I don't need to hesitate anymore. Jung Hyun's screams echoed through the neighborhood. His fingers were about to be broken by Sejun. Begging for mercy, Jung Hyun asked Sejun to spare him. Ignoring his pleas, Sejun pressed even harder, causing Jung Hyun to curse in pain. Then, Sejun forcefully twisted Jung Hyun's hand aside and punched him in the face. With Sejun gripping Jung Hyun's hand, he couldn't escape. Just lie still and accept your fate, Sejun commanded, punching him again. Sejun simultaneously silenced Jung Hyun while admonishing him. It's dark out. Stop disturbing others trying to sleep. At this moment, Jung Hyun was furious. He pulled out a knife from his jacket pocket, crazily intent on slashing Sejun's face to pieces. Luckily, Sejun dodged just in time, or else his handsome face would have been ruined. Although losing his good looks wouldn't have been a big deal, Sejun's arm was already bleeding. Sejun couldn't believe Jung Hyun was so dangerously unhinged to actually wield a knife. Jung Hyun held the knife menacingly in front of Sejun, daring him to come closer. Suddenly, he remembered Hajin's advice. He smirked menacingly and said that after dealing with Sejun, he would deal with Hajin next. Action had once said, if the opponent used a knife, there was a way to handle it. First, quickly position both hands to block the body in front, eyes looking at the opponent, and slightly step back. Then turn around and run as fast as possible, remembering action's teachings. Sejun immediately put this into practice. When Jung Hyun saw Sejun turn and run, he was astonished. He felt something was off here. Despite his martial arts training, if the opponent had a knife, he needed to find an opportunity to escape immediately to avoid death. Sejun ran a distance and spotted a brick on the ground. He bent down to pick it up. At this moment, Jung Hyun was still standing in place, using all his curse words against Sejun. Suddenly, a brick flew straight at him, hitting him in the forehead. Jung Hyun yelled in pain and dropped the knife from his hand. However, Sejun seized the opportunity and swiftly rushed to grab Jung Hyun, both of them falling to the ground simultaneously. Jung Hyun's head hit the ground hard, leaving him dazed. Before he could recover, he suddenly felt breathless. Sejun had used both legs to tightly clamp his neck, immobilizing him. Jung Hyun reluctantly raised the white flag, asking Sejun if he was curious about him. If Sejun wanted to know, he should let him go. Sejun replied that of course he had many questions, but first he needed to teach him a lesson to cleanse the grudge. With his grip still tight around Jung Hyun's neck, Sejun started asking him questions. Seeing Jung Hyun yelling for an ambulance, Sejun was annoyed and asked if he wanted a punch or an answer. Just like with Lee Young-gol before, Hajin had once punched him in the right cheek. This time, Sejun would give Jung Hyun something similar. Seeing Sejun raise his fist, Jung Hyun began to feel fear. He tried to explain that he wasn't a threat, but before he could finish, Sejun landed a strong punch right on his face. Blood gushed from Jong Hyun's nose like a fountain, and he weakly cried out for help. At this moment, the scene of Sejun hitting Young Hyun had been covertly observed from a distance by someone. It turned out to be Manager Kim, who was monitoring them through a tablet for some time now. Manager Kim instructed his subordinate to temporarily set aside this matter and focus on investigating who would transport Young Hyun away in a new vehicle. Meanwhile, An Chang-soo was dining with a girl when Manager Kim called him. As he listened, the girl snatched the phone away and informed Manager Kim that the contest had changed its rules, but she had already devised a meticulous plan to handle it. Several days later, Sejun was walking down the street when someone suddenly tapped his shoulder. Upon turning around, he saw a girl in the hospital. Lee had awakened from a coma after several days. The doctor reassured her that her injuries weren't too severe, and she just needed a few days' rest to recover. Sejun also arrived at the hospital to visit Lee. When the doctor saw him, he informed Sejun that the patient admitted at the same time as Lee had been transferred to another hospital because theirs lacked the specialized surgeons for timely emergency surgery. The doctor reassured both of them that the student wasn't seriously harmed, so they shouldn't worry too much. After thanking the doctor, Sejun bowed his head and apologized to Lee, feeling responsible for what happened to her because of him. Lee suddenly burst into tears, expressing deep remorse for Young Hyun. She had been Young Hyun's homeroom teacher when he was a freshman. Despite knowing about his abusive family situation, she couldn't intervene deeply. All she could do was help Jong Hyun learn to defend himself. However, one day on the way home, Lee saw Jong Hyun talking to a stranger at school. Normally reserved and without close friends, Jong Hyun stood talking to the man for a long time. Lee thought he might be someone from the sports center, so she didn't question Jong Hyun the next day. But soon after, Jong Hyun got into a fight with the school bullies who regularly harassed weaker students. He eventually became their leader. From that day on, all the students in the school feared Young Hyun. There was one instance where Young Hyun got drunk and was brutally beaten by his father. Normally silent and enduring, that day was different. Manager Kim had told Young Hyun that violence was the only way to defeat violence. If he didn't fight back, he'd forever be a cowardly victim. So Jong Hyun took a risk and followed Manager Kim's words. He used his hand to block his father's fist and retaliated with a punch. It was the first time Jong Hyun fought back against his father. Since then, Jong Hyun had completely transformed into a different person. Sejun felt pity for Young Hyun's circumstances, but it didn't justify the things he had done. While some people in the world admit their mistakes and make amends, others believe their actions are justified and never admit wrongdoing. This made a world of difference. Lee explained that children like Jong Hyun, who are emotionally scarred, are often easily swayed by the words of those around them. The words of that man must have been very persuasive to make Young Hyun listen to him. Such people are called demons, deceiving the weak-minded and leading them to self-destructive acts. Back to the present, Sejun stood silently looking at the girl in front of him, sensing a somewhat awkward atmosphere. The girl broke the silence, attempting to engage in conversation. Despite their back-and-forth questioning, neither was willing to reveal their true names. Suddenly, the girl reached out and touched Sejun's arm, which immediately made him recoil. His reaction caught the girl off guard, as if his arm had touched something dirty. At that moment, Hajin appeared unexpectedly from behind, witnessing someone seemingly flirting with her boyfriend. She sharply remarked, "Hey miss, don't flirt. The flower already has an owner." This comment infuriated the girl, but she chose to ignore Hajin's presence. Sejun and Hajin then left to grab a meal, the first time either had been so blatantly disregarded, leaving the girl truly angry. She gripped her fist and vowed to ruin their happiness. Later that evening, Scarface arrived to meet Action. He reported having monitored all users of the dark web, learning they were discussing incidents like organizing students to fight brutally, but this wasn't Action's main concern. Action coldly turned to him and asked if he knew who was running that dark web. Scarface explained the dark web used a special connection program, making it untraceable, but he had a lead. Before revealing it, Scarface proposed to Action that if he disclosed the lead, could they halt this dangerous operation. Action calmly replied with an assurance, telling him to spill it. As Action idly spun his weapon, muttering about where he left it, Scarface, visibly frightened, hastened to divulge the information. He mentioned a poster seen by the person he monitored, showing the location of the competition, adorned with a grand prize background. When asked about the prize, Scarface revealed it was drugs. At that moment, a young man with dark circles under his eyes entered, seeking head of department Kim. He was visibly trembling, pleading for some medication. The young man explained that his scheduled fights kept getting postponed, and people like him knew what to do. Head of department Kim not only refused to give him any, but bluntly stated they provided goods cheaply for convenience. Not enough to buy that much medication with just tournament rewards. It turned out this was Lee Young Gold, whose body had been ravaged by drugs, barely resembling a human anymore. Head of department Kim expressed admiration for Lee Young Gold's spirited fighting during the recent matches, promising him a small dose upon hearing about the forthcoming medication. Grateful at the prospect of receiving medication, Lee Young Gold thanked head of department Kim enthusiastically. He then inquired about the format of the current competition, unable to contain his anticipation. Head of department Kim asked Lee Young Gold if he remembered a female student who once participated in an event involving martial arts. A friend of that student was now searching for every participant in that competition to seek revenge on head of department Kim. Lee Young Gold had mistakenly live-streamed the incident and learned martial arts to exact vengeance on behalf of his friend. Head of department Kim found the young man intriguing, speculating that his involvement in this event would surely attract considerable sponsorship. Lee Young Gold asked if they should let the young man win. However, head of department Kim chuckled deeply, saying it wasn't necessary because it was all about the reality. If Lee Young Gold won, he would provide him with enough medication for a year. As they conversed, Director Han entered cautiously, reminding head of department Kim to be careful, and accidentally kicked Lee Young Gold below. Director Han jumped in shock at Lee Young Gold's appearance after drug use, hastily handing him a few bills from his pocket and urging him to buy some food. Lee Young Gold quickly picked up the money from the floor and hurriedly left. After Lee Young Gold left, Director Han asked Chief Kim about their strategy for this event. Kim replied, "We don't need to worry. If it's not this one, it'll be another. These troubled kids are everywhere, with holes in their souls that he can find anywhere." At that moment, Lee Ango was downstairs waiting to receive his medication. Shortly after, someone came out and delivered the medication to him. Lee Young Gold held the money Director Han had given him earlier and asked if he could buy more medicine. He was promptly slapped in response. Meanwhile, tension brewed between Action and Jo Hyun. The reason being Jo Hyun's reluctance to embrace men during martial arts practice, believing men should fight rather than embrace. Action tersely responded that if Jo Hyun felt that way, he should leave. Hearing this, Jo Hyun appeared somewhat frightened and reluctantly agreed to comply. Subsequently, 3 or 4 people started to attack Jo Hyun after everyone had finished showering in the training room. Eventually, only Jo Hyun and Sejun remained. Sejun approached Jo Hyun, sat beside him, and teased him with a mocking smile, causing Jo Hyun to feel somewhat embarrassed but unable to retaliate. Sejun suddenly brought up An Chang-soo, praising his outstanding performance compared to others in their group. An Chang-soo, skilled in martial arts and a former wrestler, had now attained mastery in Noji-style martial arts. After showering, Sejun invited Jo Hyun to eat spicy rice cakes with him, despite having just engaged in intense physical activity. Jo Hyun agreed immediately, believing it was appropriate to consume carbohydrates after such exertion. Sejun was taken aback when he looked at Jo Hyun's physique and then at his own. He found it difficult to broach the subject, but eventually asked Jo Hyun how he could achieve a body like his. Jo Hyun replied confidently that achieving an 8-pack abs required diligent weightlifting. After speaking, Jo Hyun glanced at Sejun's body and was visibly surprised to see that Sejun appeared much leaner compared to when they first met. As Jo Hyun casually commented on his own physique, Sejun abruptly turned away. Jo Hyun remarked that with Sejun's current body, he wouldn't be able to handle physical confrontations like An Chang-soo, who was formidable partly due to his rigorous self-discipline and strict self-management. An Chang-soo consistently made time for training despite fatigue or busy schedules, although he wasn't inherently diligent or disciplined, often forgetting instructions and having to start over up to 10 times. Jo Hyun characterized An Chang-soo as single-mindedly focused on physical ability, which made him appear harmless and naive until he engaged in physical activities. When Jo Hyun praised An Chang-soo, Sejun felt nauseated because, despite appearing gentle, An Chang-soo extorted money from weaker individuals and participated in illegal fights. However, Jo Hyun clarified that An Chang-soo had never bullied or extorted anyone. His involvement in illegal fights was orchestrated by someone else. Jo Hyun revealed that An Chang-soo was essentially a puppet controlled by a red-haired girl named Kang Jae-jin, whom Sejun had encountered before. Jo Hyun cautioned Sejun to be cautious around her, as sweet exteriors often masked dangerous intentions. While they were discussing, action appeared, causing Sejun and Jo Hyun to behave nervously like children. They stammered as they asked Action if he had eaten tteokbokki. After hearing Action answer, yes, then quickly run away. At the gym, An Chang-soo was practicing for the upcoming match. Jiujitsu asked why. At that moment, An Chang-soo didn't participate in the match with the female student. If she had been there, things would have been different. An Chang-soo said he couldn't fight with a girl, and moreover, she was so small. In the evening, Jiujitsu arranged to meet a female student from the same school as Hajin. The girl said that a few months ago, Seo Hajin had an accident, so she dropped out of school. But she didn't know the specific details of the accident. Jiujitsu was surprised to hear that Hajin had dropped out, and the girl also mentioned that after leaving school, Seo Hajin had started studying at a test prep center. At this point, Jiujitsu had a wicked plan in mind. She intended to lure all of Hajin's friends there. After finishing dinner alone, An Chang-soo stepped outside and heard someone calling him. When he turned back, he unexpectedly met Jo Hyun here. An Chang-soo was very happy to see Jo Hyun after a long time. He reached out to invite Jo Hyun to have dinner with him, but suddenly Jo Hyun pulled back his hand and said if he didn't want to get hurt and couldn't move, he should quickly break up with Kang Jae-jin. Seeing Jo Hyun mentioning his girlfriend, An Chang-soo felt a bit uncomfortable. Turned around, An Chang-soo asked Jo Hyun to repeat what he said because he didn't hear it clearly before. Jo Hyun patiently repeated that if An Chang-soo didn't break up with Jae-jin, his future would be ruined, and even Jo Hyun himself would have to teach him a lesson for being foolish. After hearing this, An Chang-soo burst out laughing, saying he knew Jo Hyun's intention was because Jo Hyun was jealous of him having a beautiful girlfriend like Jae-jin, so he wanted to ruin them, right? An Chang-soo thought Jo Hyun was joking with him like before. Even if Jo Hyun explained, he still refused to listen. An Chang-soo's attitude left Jo Hyun speechless. Jo Hyun asked An Chang-soo if he really didn't know that Jae-jin was using him. At this point, An Chang-soo was a little angry. He didn't allow Jo Hyun to speak ill of his girlfriend. Clearly, An Chang-soo knew Jae-jin didn't like him at all, and she was only with him for her own benefit. But An Chang-soo didn't want to break up with Jae-jin. He cried and complained because after breaking up, he wouldn't find anyone as beautiful as Jae-jin. An Chang-soo's answer made Jo Hyun turn into ice. In his life, he had never seen anyone as foolish and crazy as this guy. Not long after, Jo Hyun and An Chang-soo went to a restaurant together. Jo Hyun had only advised him to break up with Jae-jin earlier, but he acted as if he had been heartbroken. An Chang-soo sadly asked the owner for a bottle of wine. Jo Hyun thought to himself that having a lover and being so miserable, it would be better to be single. Then, Jo Hyun kindly informed An Chang-soo that Jae-jin was now trying to approach Sejun. Maybe that was her new plan. However, An Chang-soo was completely blind to Kang Jae-jin. No matter what Jo Hyun said, he refused to listen. After leaving the restaurant, An Chang-soo felt full in his stomach, while Jo Hyun still didn't give up advising An Chang-soo to break up with Jae-jin. An Chang-soo firmly told Jo Hyun that he wouldn't break up with Jae-jin someday. he will make Jiujitsu love him sincerely. As for the upcoming match, An Chang-soo told Jo Hyun to rest assured. He knew his limits and wouldn't do anything to Sejun. Jo Hyun, helpless before An Chang-soo's stubbornness, didn't say anything more. Just as he was about to say goodbye to An Chang-soo, Jo Hyun suddenly threw a punch at him. An Chang-soo quickly dodged it. Jo Hyun continued to throw more punches, but An Chang-soo dodged them all effortlessly. Jo Hyun thought to himself that this guy was indeed formidable. Even though he was attacked unexpectedly, his body reacted very quickly. This time, Sejun had encountered a formidable opponent. After exchanging a few words with An Chang-soo, Jo Hyun bid him goodbye and left. Meanwhile, Jijin sought out the same female student again to inquire about Seo Hajin. When she heard the girl say that Seo Hajin didn't have any close friends, Jijin was very surprised. It turned out that Hajin wasn't isolated, but rather she slept too much. Whether in class or during break times, Hajin always fell asleep on her desk, avoiding interaction with anyone. So, Jijin wondered where Hajin would get close friends from. At that moment, Hajin was dozing off in class when someone called her name. Startled, she woke up to find herself alone in the classroom. She assumed the school guard had come to check the classroom and woke her up upon finding a student still there. Hajin thanked the guard and then left the school with her bag. The other female student and Jijian, who were across the street, also saw Hajin leaving. As usual, Hajin was walking home alone. Jijian took this opportunity to follow her. Later, she raised her hand and struck Hajin hard on the head. Caught off guard, Hajin stumbled and fell to the ground. Seeing Hajin trembling all over, Jijian was somewhat shocked. Wasn't she supposed to have trained in martial arts or something? Why did she look so frightened now? Indeed, Hajin was trembling in fear, unable to control herself. Tears welled up in her eyes. Hajin tried to calm herself down. She couldn't let all her years of effort go to waste. Eventually, she managed to stand up on her own and approached Jijian. She blocked the hand that was about to slap her and flashed back to when she was 10 years old. After school, Hajin walked out of the school when some boys from her class called her. They teased her about her new haircut and asked if her mom's boyfriend had cut it for her. Hajin, tearful and upset, explained that it wasn't her mom's boyfriend. They were married, so he was her stepdad. One of the boys refused to let it go and intentionally claimed that Hajin's mom was having an affair with her stepdad. Enraged, Hajin tightened her grip on her hand when suddenly, Sejun appeared behind the boy. Sejun mentioned seeing the boy's new phone left on the table in the classroom. Upon hearing this, the boy panicked and ran away. This allowed Sejun to free Hajin from the situation. Then, Sejun turned back to look at Hajin closely. Hajin thought he was like those who had teased her earlier, so she was a bit angry. Unexpectedly, Sejun praised her new haircut, which made Hajin feel a bit happier. He then reached out to pat her head and advised her not to feel sad or insecure because of what others said. She just needed to pay attention to those who loved her. Not long after, Hajin's stepfather arrived to pick her up. Sejun promptly greeted the man, and it seemed that Hajin still felt a bit awkward around him. She asked if her stepfather knew Sejun, to which he replied that Sejun was his friend's son. Lately, Sejun's family had been busy with work, so they asked him to pick up the boy. Hajin's stepfather then asked if it was inconvenient for her to ride with Sejun. Hajin quickly waved her hand, saying no, noticing the atmosphere between the two kids. Her stepfather quickly sensed something strange. At this moment, Sejun said he would go throw away the trash. Then he turned back to ask the two to get in the car first. He then walked to the trash can, put his hand in his pocket, took out a phone, turned out to be the latest iPhone of that kid. Sejun threw it straight into the trash can in front of him. What a lesson indeed! Since that day, Hajin gradually became closer to Sejun. She also opened the door of her heart wider to welcome him. Living by the motto of a perfect world, Hajin believed in living happy days with the people she loved. It seemed like this happiness would last long. However, Sejun's mother suddenly passed away. And since then, Sejun withdrew, not as cheerful as before. Sejun used to be the one who pulled Hajin out of her shell, and now it was Hajin's turn to pull him out of the darkness. Seeing Sejun sitting sadly on the stairs, Hajin gently sat not far away. No need to try to console or do anything else, because being by his side was the best comfort. Back to the present. When Hajin heard Jaejeon wanting to destroy Sejun, she was extremely angry. Hajin would never let that happen. Seeing Hajin's arrogant attitude, Jaejeon angrily raised her fist towards her. Hajin quickly avoided it, then bent down to hug Jaejeon's legs and pulled them strongly, causing her to fall to the ground. Hajin asked what her purpose was in approaching her and Sejun. Jaejeon said she wanted to destroy the two of them, but she said she didn't need to do anything. Sejun had already destroyed himself before, and the reason Sejun destroyed himself was because of Hajin. Jaejeon's words stunned Hajin. She released Jaejeon and stood up dejectedly. Jaejeon continued to speak. It was all because of Hajin that Sejun started practicing martial arts and doing bad things. While she was speaking vehemently, she was punched in the mouth. It turned out Sejun had arrived. Jaejeon's mouth was bleeding from the punch, and she covered her mouth, seeing a tooth on her hand. Jaejeon's hand trembled. Sejun said, "A beautiful mouth that cannot speak beautiful words is better off gone." Better yet, Sejun said that if Jaejeon messed with the wrong person this time, he wouldn't let her off easily. Suddenly, Jaejeon burst into laughter. Sejun didn't understand why she was laughing at what Jaejeon said. Sejun's demeanor made her feel amused. Should she call him cool or foolish? Jaejeon's mocking face annoyed Sejun, so he gave her another punch. Jaejeon hugged her face in anger, but then she laughed again. She said she had asked someone to record it, so Sejun was surely done for this time. Saying that, Jaejeon turned around, told the girl hiding behind the wall over there to bring the video, edit it, and then upload it to the internet. Although she knew it was not right, at present, Jaejeon knew the weakness of that girl, so she could only follow Jaejeon's words. Then the girl hurriedly ran away with her phone. At this moment, Jaejeon is challenging Sejun to see what he can do if a video of him hitting a woman is released online. Jaejeon threatens that if Sejun chases after the female student to retrieve the phone, he will beat Hajin mercilessly. Unexpectedly, Sejun doesn't pursue the student. Instead, he turns and walks towards Hajin, ignoring Jaejeon's repeated warnings that this will ruin his life. Sejun remains unfazed. While Hajin is overwhelmed with guilt, Sejun tightly covers her ears with his hands. The surroundings suddenly become quiet, and Jaejeon's curses can no longer be heard. This action reminds Hajin of when she was a child. Back then, she used to cover Sejun's ears so he wouldn't hear his own self-reproach. At 10 years old, Hajin promised Sejun that she would always stand by him. Now, Sejun is repeating the same words that Hajin once said to him, assuring her that no matter what happens, he will always stand by her. The sweet atmosphere between the two annoys Jaejeon. She picks up a wooden stick and approaches them. As she is about to sneak attack Sejun, Hajin pushes him away, and then swiftly punches Jaejeon hard in the jaw. The punch knocks out a few more of Jaejeon's teeth, and renders her unconscious on the ground. Seeing Hajin take down Jaejeon leaves Sejun in shock. After dealing with Jaejeon, Hajin remembers the female student who secretly filmed the video earlier. She asks where they can find her now. Sejun assures her not to worry as Jo Hyun is already on it. Meanwhile, the scene of Jaejeon being beaten is also witnessed by director Kim, who is monitoring the trio through a tablet. Watching Jaejeon get beaten so badly makes him laugh uncontrollably. At this moment, a subordinate informs Director Kim that they have investigated someone named Action. They only know that he trains at the same gym as Sejun, but his background remains unknown. The schools Action attended have long since closed, making it difficult to gather information. They even checked if he had a military background, but found nothing. Director Kim speculates that Action must have fabricated a new identity and is living a different life. The next day, Sejun visits the gym to meet Action and asks him to teach him combat techniques to defeat a wrestler skilled in Jiujitsu. Action agrees without hesitation and tells Sejun to strip off all his clothes. Hearing this, Sejun quickly complies, leaving only his shorts on. Two other gym members emerge from the shower, astonished to see the two of them nearly naked in the gym. Action dismisses them without explanation. After the others leave, Sejun asks Action about the differences between Noji and Jiujitsu. Action explains that they are fundamentally the same, but Jiujitsu practitioners wear a dye, which prevents the use of certain choke and lock techniques. Sejun recalls drunken men fighting and stripping off their shirts before brawling. Though they didn't know Noji, they were just trying to show off. However, true masters strip their shirts for a different reason. An incident comes to mind where a drunken man bumped into another on the street. Despite apologizing, the other man refused to let it go and tried to attack him, only to strike the man's jacket. True masters remove their shirts to prevent opponents from grabbing them. The attacker turned around to see the drunken man standing shirtless, surprised at how quickly he had removed his shirt. At this moment, the middle-aged man continues to say strange things. Those who take off their jackets are third-rate. Those who take off their shirts are second-rate. And those who take off their pants are top-notch. His bizarre remarks anger the other man, who charges at him again. However, no matter how hard he punches, he can't land a hit on the middle-aged man. Since the man has taken off his shirt, his body is slippery, and even if someone grabs his arms or legs, he can easily slip free. The other man then notices the middle-aged man's large belly and assumes that the fat would make him slow. He decides to target it, and with lightning speed, punches the middle-aged man's belly hard. Surprisingly, the belly is incredibly firm, feeling like a wall. The man clutches his aching hand in pain. Before leaving, the middle-aged man picks up his jacket and warns the other man, never underestimate others. Back at the gym, Action explains that the Jiujitsu being used in recent MMA fights is Noji Jiujitsu. He mentions that Noji Jiujitsu is more practical than traditional Jiujitsu because it requires skills to fight opponents who are not wearing anything. Action then asks Sejun why he wants to learn Nogi Jiujitsu. As he calmly asks this, he has Sejun in a tight chokehold. After being released, Sejun coughs and explains that he wants to learn Nogi Jiujitsu because his upcoming opponent is skilled in it. Action agrees to teach him, but emphasizes that winning requires certain techniques. A few days later, Jijian meets with An Shang-soo. She removes her mask, revealing a missing tooth, and tells him that it was Kim Sejun who did this to her. She wants An Shang-soo to take revenge on Sejun for her. An Shang-soo doesn't believe Sejun would hit a woman. Disappointed, Jijian pulls her mask back up and bluntly breaks up with him. Right after the breakup, Jijian calls another man to ask for help. After she leaves, An Shang-soo breaks down in tears. Meanwhile, Officer Na is being reprimanded by his superior for continuing to follow Yang Hyung-shik. His superior argues that the investigation into the case ended a long time ago and questions why Officer Na is still pursuing it. Officer Na insists that the case cannot be closed without any findings. He explains that the case involves an illegal organization conducting underground martial arts fights with students and potentially engaging in more serious crimes. Officer Na is determined to see the investigation through to the end. His superior angrily demands concrete evidence if Officer Na wants to continue the investigation, otherwise, he should drop it. Frustrated, his superior dismisses him. After leaving the office, Officer Na encounters Officer Jiang and asks if there have been any updates on Kim Jong-hyun. Officer Jiang reports that there is still no news. Since disappearing from the hospital, Kim Jong-hyun hasn't returned home or gone to school. They have no idea where he might be. Officer Jiang recalls seeing a suspicious man wearing glasses at Golden Opistel and decides to follow up on that lead. After that, Officer Jiang saw the man enter room 1903, which was strange since the owner of that room currently lives abroad. Following that sighting, Officer Jiang never saw the man with glasses there again, suspecting he had left the building. Before returning to the police station, Officer Jiang created a facial composite of the man. He explained that his initial plan was to go to the hospital to apprehend Kim Jong-hyun, believing that scaring the cowardly kid a bit would make him confess everything. However, by the time he reached the hospital, Kim Jong-hyun had already fled. As for the man with glasses, they lacked concrete evidence to issue a warrant for his arrest. At this moment, Officer Na was holding a file in his hand. Out of curiosity, Officer Jiang urged him to open it to see what was inside. To their surprise, it contained evidence of someone spreading videos to blackmail others, with the culprit being Kang Jijian. Among the evidence was a photo of Kang Jijian standing next to a car, which Officer Jiang quickly recognized as the car involved in the hit-and-run incident with Kim Jong-hyun. It seemed Kang Jijian was connected to that case as well. Officer Na wondered who had sent these pieces of evidence to the police station since there was no sender information on the package. Nevertheless, they decided they needed to find someone named Choi Jun-sik first. Meanwhile, Action was asleep but sensed someone staring at him. He opened his eyes to see a shadowy figure. It was Jo Hyun, who had returned to the gym with another person, the female student who helped secretly record Kang Jijian's video that night. The student thanked them for helping her delete all the images and videos from Kang Jijian's phone. However, she now feared going back to school because she would be doomed if she ran into Kang Jijian. Action told her there was nothing to be afraid of. If she encountered Jijian, she should just fight back. No matter what happens, facing and resolving the problem courageously is the only way to overcome it. Action advised the student to inform the police before confronting Kang Jijian, and then just go ahead and fight her head-on. That evening, Kang Jijian stood waiting for someone in a deserted alley. Suddenly, someone grabbed her hand, startling her. She turned around to see Kim Jong-hyun. For the past few days, Kim Jong-hyun had been trying to evade the police, seeing wanted posters of himself everywhere. He had called Jijian out tonight to discuss something important. Jong-hyun asked if she had any plans because his arm was broken by Sejun, and he needed to kick Sejun's arm hard to get revenge. Jijian said they couldn't touch Sejun at the moment. Instead, they should target Seo Hajin. She knew that Hajin attended a cram school daily, so they just needed Jong-hyun to become an employee there and find an opportunity to corner Hajin in a place like the restroom. Jijeon planned to hide and film the incident. As she was explaining this, Jong-hyun suddenly grabbed her by the throat and pushed her against the wall. He declared that he wouldn't foolishly follow her plan because if anything went wrong, he'd be the one to suffer. This time, Jong-hyun wanted Jijeon to follow his lead. That night, as Sejun stepped out of the gym, it began to rain. At that moment, someone was approaching from not too far away. The person asked if he was Kim Sejun. Deep in thought, Sejun was startled when he suddenly heard someone call his name. The person was wearing a raincoat with a hood, so Sejun initially thought it was an older man. However, when the person looked up with tears streaming down his face, it turned out to be our sad boy An Chang-soo. Sejun opened his umbrella and walked over to talk to him. An Chang-soo stood in the rain, looking extremely miserable. Sejun looked at An Chang-soo's face and asked him what was wrong, which An Chang-soo misunderstood as a jab at his appearance, making him a bit irritated. He retorted that Sejun shouldn't act all high and mighty just because he's tall and handsome. Sejun clarified that he wasn't making fun of his looks, but wanted to know why An Chang-soo was crying. An Chang-soo denied crying, claiming it was just the rain. Putting this aside, Sejun asked him why he was there. An Chang-soo said he wanted to confirm something. His girlfriend, Kang Jijian, had claimed that Sejun had knocked out her tooth, but since she often lied, An Chang-soo wanted to ask Sejun if it was true. Instead of answering, Sejun asked him if he had been dumped, striking a nerve. An Chang-soo quickly denied it, saying they hadn't broken up but just had a fight. Seeing that Sejun kept bringing up the breakup, An Chang-soo, embarrassed and angry, grabbed Sejun by the collar, demanding the truth. At this point, Sejun's demeanor suddenly changed. He told An Chang-soo that Hajin had been surrounded and beaten by them. Violence isn't just physical, it leaves serious psychological scars on the victim. An Chang-soo had seen Jijeon beating Hajin, but just stood by and watched without intervening. Cowards like An Chang-soo, and those who exploit others' weaknesses to threaten them, like Kang Jijian, are equally despicable. Sejun looked An Chang-soo straight in the eye and admitted that he had indeed beaten up Kang Jijian. Moreover, it wasn't just her. Everyone who had participated in that fight would get their turn. At this point, An Chang-soo removed his raincoat, seemingly ready for a fight with Sejun. The wise action had once said that against a wrestler capable of quickly taking down an opponent, one couldn't win with Jiujitsu or punches alone. The only way was to hinder him with whatever was at hand. Suddenly, An Chang-soo was hit in the face with an umbrella. Furious, he turned to curse at Sejun. Sejun had let go of the umbrella, using it as a barrier between himself and An Chang-soo. Sejun then pushed the umbrella towards An Chang-soo, who angrily tossed it aside. Seizing the moment, Sejun landed a punch on An Chang-soo's jaw, followed by several more to his face, causing An Chang-soo to spit blood. Out of nowhere, An Chang-soo wrapped his arm around Sejun's neck, smirking and asking for a few seconds to catch his breath. In response, Sejun delivered a powerful punch to An Chang-soo's face, saying, "Here's your breath." At this moment, An Chang-soo had no opportunity to counterattack and had to endure Sejun's continuous assault. Suddenly, An Chang-soo raised his hand, making Sejun think he was going to grab his leg, so he quickly stepped aside. Unexpectedly, An Chang-soo placed his hand on Sejun's hand and kneeled on one knee, making it look like he was proposing. An Chang-soo seriously stated that he would now fight properly. Sejun delivered a strong blow to An Chang-soo's head and said, "If you want it, I'll give it to you." Sejun then took off his jacket. However, after Sejun's head strike, An Chang-soo collapsed to the ground, lying still. Sejun told him to stop pretending and get up to fight like real men. After a moment of silence, An Chang-soo struggled to his feet, saying he would repay Sejun for what his girlfriend Jijian endured. He would now give his all to defeat Sejun. An Chang-soo barely raised his head when he saw a pair of shoes right in front of him. Sejun kicked An Chang-soo in the face, but An Chang-soo managed to block it with his hand just in time. An Chang-soo, furious that Sejun attacked while he was talking, sarcastically said that Sejun couldn't even get into a proper wrestling stance and asked if Sejun needed him to teach how to do it. Sejun replied he didn't need it and threw a punch at An Chang-soo. Despite Sejun's refusal, An Chang-soo explained that when two Jiu-Jitsu fighters are too heated, the first move is usually a punch. Putting theory into practice, An Chang-soo immediately lunged and landed a punch on Sejun's face, causing Sejun to stagger back a few steps. Sejun realized that while An Chang-soo's strength was considerable, his punching power was weaker compared to Jo Hyun and Kim Jong-hyun. As long as Sejun avoided getting hit on the jaw, he still had a chance to win through continuous attacks. Sejun remembered An Chang-soo taking a punch to the jaw earlier, but recovering quickly, indicating that An Chang-soo's neck muscles were also strong. Seeing Sejun deep in thought, An Chang-soo asked what he was thinking. Sejun commented that An Chang-soo's punches were weak, speculating that all his muscle mass must be in his neck. This remark insulted An Chang-soo's pride. Criticizing his appearance was one thing, but insulting his muscles was unacceptable. Infuriated, An Chang-soo charged at Sejun with his fists. Sejun dodged the blow and countered with a strong punch to An Chang-soo's ribs, only to be surprised when An Chang-soo turned back towards the side he was hit. Shocked, Sejun then found himself lifted and slammed to the ground by An Chang-soo, who wrapped his arms around Sejun's back, locking him in place. Despite Sejun's struggles, he couldn't break free, having been careless in allowing An Chang-soo to attack his side so easily. Now completely restrained, Sejun watched as An Chang-soo raised his fist and unleashed a barrage of punches. Sejun tried his best to block the attacks with his arms, bracing himself against the onslaught. At this moment, An Chang-soo grabbed one of Sejun's arms and pulled hard. Sejun quickly used his other arm to resist. An Chang-soo said that Sejun's efforts were futile and that it would be better for him to give up. Sejun immediately retorted, "Then you give up your girlfriend first, you idiot." This remark struck a nerve with An Chang-soo, who angrily yanked Sejun's arm even harder while explaining what love really meant. Suddenly, a cracking sound was heard. An Chang-soo quickly released Sejun's arm, worriedly asking if he was okay and if he needed to go to the hospital. While he was talking, Sejun landed a punch right on An Chang-soo's mouth. Spitting out blood, An Chang-soo stood up and suggested they stop fighting. saying he had avenged Jiujun, and it was time for them to go their separate ways. But Sejun wasn't ready to stop. Despite his injured arm, he grabbed An Chang-soo's leg, lifted him up, and slammed him to the ground. Sometime later, An Chang-soo slowly regained consciousness. As he opened his eyes, he saw a face close to his own, and thought he had died and gone to hell. Closing his eyes, he lamented about the fickleness of life. Jo Hyun tapped An Chang-soo's head, telling him to wake up. After sitting up, An Chang-soo asked Jo Hyun what had happened, recalling only being slammed to the ground. Jo Hyun explained that after that slam, An Chang-soo lost consciousness. Worried about Sejun, An Chang-soo asked how he was, remembering he might have broken Sejun's arm during their fight. Jo Hyun reassured him that Sejun had gone to the hospital for a checkup. An Chang-soo wondered why he wasn't taken to the hospital but was instead here. A few hours earlier, Action and Jo Hyun were talking when they saw Sejun carrying someone into the building. Jo Hyun asked who Sejun was carrying, and Sejun replied it was An Chang-soo, explaining they had fought, and he had slammed An Chang-soo to the ground. Jo Hyun, concerned, asked if they needed to call an ambulance. Action glanced at An Chang-soo and calmly said there was no need as he was just sleeping, noting that An Chang-soo was dreaming about his ex-girlfriend, calling out Jijun, Jijian in his sleep. Jo Hyun and Sejun were left speechless, thinking An Chang-soo was a pitiful wreck. Seeing Sejun's swollen arm, Action advised him to go to the hospital immediately. Back in the present, after hearing Jo Hyun recount everything, An Chang-soo felt a pang of guilt, hoping Sejun's arm was okay. Suddenly, Jo Hyun asked An Chang-soo about Jijun's whereabouts, noting that she hadn't been to school recently. An Chang-soo, looking dejected, said he didn't know. Jo Hyun, puzzled, wondered who else would know if not him. At this moment, An Chang-soo finally looked up, his face filled with sorrow and tears streaming down. He confessed that he and Kang Jijian had broken up. Jo Hyun, instead of comforting him, burst into a joyful smile, unable to hide his happiness. Laughing loudly, Jo Hyun exclaimed that it was great news and that he had been waiting for this day. An Chang-soo felt both embarrassed and angry. After laughing for a while, Jo Hyun became serious and asked An Chang-soo if he knew where the school new club was. Meanwhile, in a cafe, Jae-jin was sitting with Kim Jong-hyun, angrily declaring that she must catch Seo Hajin and repay the punch to her chin from the other day. Kim Jong-hyun, however, told her not to touch Seo Hajin. He nervously touched the scar on his nose, a reminder of when someone attacked him with an axe. The memory still frightened him. He advised Jae-jeon to set a trap for Sejun first and then steal Hajin's phone. Jong-hyun planned to use Hajin's phone to lure Sejun into a meeting where he could ambush him. While Jong-hyun was discussing the plan with Jae-jeon, he suddenly noticed the police. Panic set in as he lowered his head and warned Jae-jeon not to look behind. Officer Na, recognizing both Kang Jijeon and Kim Jong-hyun, called his colleagues to inform them. Realizing they had been discovered, Jong-hyun grabbed Jae-jin's head, threw her towards the police and ran. He jumped over the cafe railing, shouting that they would never catch him. But as soon as he landed, he saw Officer Jiang waiting for him. Jong-hyun froze in surprise. Officer Jiang delivered a powerful kick to Jong-hyun's face, expressing his relief at finally being able to go home. The kick sent Jong-hyun sprawling to the ground. Officer Jiang remarked that people like Kim Jong-hyun were like cockroaches that needed to be exterminated before they grew more dangerous. When Officer Na and another officer escorted Jae-jeon out, they were stunned by the scene. Officer Na, seeing Jong-hyun lying motionless, asked if he was dead, recalling how hard Officer Jiang had kicked him. Officer Jiang walked over and kicked Jong-hyun a few more times to check. Jong-hyun was not dead, just suffering from a broken leg, lying there trembling and clutching his injured leg. Soon after, Kim Jong-hyun and Kang Jijeon were taken to the police station. Officer Jiang, holding a notebook, hit Jong-hyun on the head, repeatedly questioning him about thinking the police were a joke, and how he planned to evade the law just because he was a minor. Jiang threatened that if Jong Hyun didn't want to end up in juvenile detention, he should confess everything about the illegal game and the attack on Seo Hajin. At this moment, Kim Jong-hyun continued to deny everything, insisting he knew nothing and demanding concrete evidence to prove any accusations against him. His insolent tone with the officers made Detective Jiang furious. He hit Kim Jong-hyun on the head several more times, telling him to straighten up quickly. Detective Jiang then questioned Kim Jong-hyun, listing his crimes: stalking Seo Hajin, plotting an attack near her home, assaulting Lim Sejun, and fleeing the scene when Officer Na caught him in the act. Additionally, one of Jong Hyun's accomplices had driven a car into an officer to help him escape. Combining these charges, Jiang warned, would be enough to put Kim Jong-hyun in a detention center for several years. Kim Jong-hyun hurriedly defended himself, claiming he had no accomplice and had nearly been killed by a madman with an axe, pointing to the scar on his nose as proof. At this moment, Detective Jiang showed him a photo of Kang Jijin standing next to a car, the very car that had hit the officer. Jiang accused Jong Hyun and Jijian of planning the whole incident together. Jiang then asked if Jong Hyun knew a man with small, squinty eyes who appeared to be running the illegal games. Hearing the mention of director Kim Jong Hyun was shocked. He couldn't understand how the police knew about him. Detective Jiang didn't need Jong Hyun to respond. His reaction confirmed his connection to Kim. Meanwhile, Officer Na was interrogating Kang Jijun. He presented a laptop to her, asking if the person in the video was her. With substantial evidence against her, including numerous victims' testimonies and evidence sent to the police station, she had no choice but to admit the truth. Officer Na advised her to confess everything about the illegal game and Seo Hajin's assault, promising to request a reduced sentence in return. Seeing the pile of videos and images, Jijin realized they were original copies. Someone had accessed her iCloud and taken all the evidence. Jijin pondered whether to implicate director Kim and director Han. If she did, it might be her only chance to get out of this situation. As she was deep in thought, Officer Na suddenly asked if she wanted anything to eat. At this moment, a man entered the police station, introducing himself as a representative from a law firm. Simultaneously, a subordinate informed Director Kim that they had contacted Lawyer Baek. It turned out Director Kim was attempting to get Kim Jong-hyun and Kang Jijian out of police custody, though he no longer wanted to use them. Kim sensed that someone was trying to approach them with the intent to threaten. The next day, Sejun, with his bandaged arm, went to the gym. Before he could enter, Action stopped him at the door, advising him to go home and rest. Action explained that Sejun's nerves were at their limit, and pushing too hard might cause permanent damage. Sejun reluctantly agreed and headed home. Curious about Action's plans, Sejun asked where he was going, but Action only said he was going home. Soon after, Action arrived at a cemetery. He poured a bottle of liquor over a grave, revealing that a friend of his had passed away. He drank and talked to his friend's grave, sharing his thoughts. After a while, a group of thugs approached Action, questioning his presence there and demanding he leave immediately. Behind the thugs was a man trembling due to drug withdrawal, visibly eager for violence and the urge to kill. At this moment, Action said he didn't want to go anywhere because he was drunk, and once he was drunk, it was hard for him to control himself. Going back several years in the past, Action had just returned home from somewhere when he suddenly saw his door wide open. Sensing something ominous, he hurried inside to investigate, confronted with a horrific scene: a woman and a child lying in a pool of blood. As he approached, he touched the child's hand and felt it cold. Just then, a foreigner with a gun appeared and shot Action in the shoulder. But Action felt no pain. He gave the foreigner a cold stare, identical to his present gaze. Now he had one of the thugs by the head, slamming him against a nearby rock. Blood from the thug's head staining the rock's surface. Action calmly stated that he despised thugs like them, and always felt like tearing them apart when he saw them causing trouble. Today, he was not in a good mood coincidentally, with these 5 thugs appearing. The thugs grew annoyed with Action's banter, and one of them lunged at him with a fist. Action blocked the punch with a bottle of soju, causing the thug to yell in pain. Not stopping there, Action shoved the entire bottle into the thug's mouth, the shards of glass causing the thug's mouth to bleed. The remaining thugs watched in fear. They wondered why this long-haired man was different from what they had heard. But their task was to test the addict, so they didn't need to get involved. They just needed Lee Young-gold to deal with the addict. Suddenly, Action appeared behind the two thugs. They heard a voice and turned around in shock. Before they could react, one of them was punched away by Action. The other was lifted by Action and thrown onto a nearby rock. The thug who had ingested the bottle of soju earlier was groaning nearby. Action walked over and delivered a blow to his face. After dealing with the thugs, Action turned to look for the addict, but he was nowhere to be seen. Could he have fled out of fear? Unexpectedly, the addict suddenly appeared behind Action. Action intended to attack stealthily, but he tilted his head gently to avoid a strike from the addict. Seeing this, Lee Young-gold became furious, grabbed Action by the hair, and started punching him repeatedly in the face. However, Action didn't collapse like the others. This bewildered Lee Young-gold. Action quickly turned around, grabbed Lee Young-gold's arm, and thought he might knock down his opponent. But Lee Young-gold didn't react to the pain despite his swollen red arm. Action asked if he didn't feel any pain. At this moment, Action shrugged off his vest and tied up his hair, preparing for what seemed like an imminent grand confrontation. Lee Young-gold thought to himself, I can't let this end like this. If he wants the drugs, he must at least break someone in front of him. Action appeared to grasp his thoughts and asked if he was panicking because things weren't going as he expected. Back in the USA, Action had witnessed drug-addicted children dying from overdoses or committing serious crimes like murder to obtain drugs, resulting in life imprisonment. There were also cases where individuals with immense willpower wanted to quit but couldn't resist the temptation of drugs. Of course, illegal drug dealers were the worst offenders, but addicts weren't much different. From the victim's perspective, drug addicts deserved to be severely punished. Without hesitation, Action swiftly moved beside Lee Young-gold. Just as Lee Young-gold glanced over, he received a punch square in the jaw. Then Action grabbed Lee Young-gold's hand and delivered a powerful blow to the space between his forearm and bicep. Lee Young-gold winced in pain, his eyes almost white with agony. Enraged, he attempted to strike back at Action with his other hand, but Action swiftly dodged the attack at close range. Recognizing that conventional punches were ineffective, Action swiftly dropped to the ground and used his leg to hook Lee Young-gold's, bringing him down forcefully. He pinned Lee Young-gold's leg tightly, causing him to cry out in fear. Lee Young-gold pleaded, claiming he was still a minor and had been coerced into his actions. Action coldly questioned him, even if you're a minor, haven't you thought for yourself? Just because someone orders you to do something, does that mean you do it, even if it's eating shit? He tightened his grip on Lee Young-gold's leg. Lee Young-gold begged Action for mercy, promising to reveal everything he knew. However, Action dismissed his plea, stating he would investigate on his own after dealing with Lee Young-gold's gang. Exhausted, Action lay down on the ground to rest. Suddenly, someone approached. Kim's subordinate advised Action to stop, warning that things could get difficult if he continued causing havoc. Curious, Action asked who the person was, speculating if he was a hired mercenary willing to do anything for money, akin to a puppet. His words angered the subordinate. Meanwhile, Kim intervened calmly through the earpiece, instructing everyone to focus on safely returning Lee Young-gold. Director Han found the situation amusing and suggested letting the two fight it out. Kim disagreed, emphasizing the need to gather more information about the long-haired man. If their subordinate didn't survive the fight, they'd lose another asset. Director Han, preoccupied with another interest, refrained from further involvement after hearing Kim's decision. At this point, Kim Jong-hyun and Kang Ji-jian were kneeling down, their faces bruised and swollen. Kim Jong-hyun pleaded with Director Han for mercy, claiming he hadn't confessed anything to the police yet. He then shifted blame onto Kang Ji-jian, suggesting she might have already spilled everything. Kang Ji-jian immediately rebutted, and the two continued arguing, causing a headache for Director Han. He warned them sternly that if they acted alone again, they should prepare to face deadly consequences. Meanwhile, Kim's computer tablet suddenly emitted a notification sound, after which he couldn't see his long-haired subordinate anymore. Kim Jong-hyun then noticed something serious and tense on Kim's face. Kim's subordinate cautioned Action not to provoke them further and suggested they should end things there. Action clarified he wasn't provoking anyone, just stating the truth. Moreover, he hinted that there was another person present today. Confused, Kim's subordinate asked what happened to the camera feed, and why Kim suddenly couldn't see anything. Action inquired with concern if the person who was spying was alright. Clearly, things were not okay because the spy didn't realize someone was behind them. As they turned back, they received a swift kick to the face, leaving their head twisted to the side. The person then removed their helmet, revealing themselves to be Seo Hajin. In the evening at the training room, everyone had just finished their workout session, and without Action or Sejun training together, they felt a bit bored. Fortunately, Jo Hyun was still around. After the workout, Jo Hyun declined joining them for spicy rice cakes, opting instead to practice punching a sandbag for a bit. The manager mentioned that among his juniors, someone had opened a boxing gym and was looking for participants for a youth boxing competition. Interested, Jo Hyun immediately agreed to participate. Before leaving the training room, the manager said he would inquire about the boxing gym's address and send it to Jo Hyun. Jo Hyun thanked him sincerely before leaving. Meanwhile, the other two hadn't gone for the spicy rice cakes yet. Jo Hyun curiously asked if they knew where Action had gone. One of them recalled that on this day last year, Action had dressed up and gone somewhere, possibly to meet a girl named Seo Hajin. Upon hearing this name, Jo Hyun seemed slightly frightened. When asked if she was beautiful, Jo Hyun nervously admitted she was indeed beautiful, but also quite scary. After dealing with the target and discreetly returning, Seo Hajin walked into the cemetery. The funeral attendees noticed the appearance of a woman and immediately asked who she was. Seo Hajin ignored them and remarked to Action, "These aren't kids. Do it the way she does." Action replied casually, "Sure, just naturally. Even if there's resistance, they can't resist someone of her level." As they saw a woman approaching, they showed contempt. They thought she was a special agent or something, but she turned out to be just a woman. As the thugs prepared to rush Seo Hajin, she drew a knife. As she passed by them, each fell to the ground, bleeding from wounds on their hands. Action was surprised they were still alive. Usually, few survived when Seo Hajin got involved. Now, it was time for the main target. Seo Hajin swiftly approached the subordinate and attacked. His reflexes barely saved him, but Hajin followed up with a leap and a kick that sent him staggering back. The subordinate wondered how a woman could possess such strength. Action then restrained him with both hands, rendering him unable to move, resigned to taking blows. Hajin swiftly moved to her next target. Soon after, the subordinate sat on the ground, nursing his legs, in pain. Hajin punched him in frustration. When she turned, Action gave him a kick. Both took turns hitting and kicking him until he lay unconscious on the ground. Hajin noticed something fall from his ear. She quickly identified it as a wireless earpiece and spoke into it, "Over here." Back at the office, Director Kim heard Hajin's voice through the earpiece but remained silent. Hajin warned, "Those who exploit others and hide will be found sooner or later. There will be a big hole waiting for them." After speaking, Hajin crushed the earpiece, cutting off any further sound. Director Kim, however, smiled with hidden meaning. Later, Director Han asked if he knew who that person was. Director Kim replied that he didn't know, but if she provoked them, they deserved the response. Instead of targeting the provocateur directly, they would aim at those around her. At that moment, Lee Young-gold was covered in blood, barely able to stand. He pleaded for Action and Hajin to call an ambulance, but Hajin not only refused to call, but also kicked him several times when he showed no signs of remorse. Seeing he was still unfazed, Hajin delivered a strong punch to his face, only to be restrained by Action. Without being able to stop Hajin physically, Action could only try to contain her verbally. Even though Action managed to restrain Hajin's limbs, her mouth continued working at full capacity. She used the most vicious words to insult Lee Young-gold. Afterward, Hajin asked Action for help investigating the masterminds behind these drug addicts. When asked why she didn't do it herself, Hajin casually replied that she was busy with overseas business. Meanwhile, Jong Hyun was on his way to the practice room when he heard someone calling him. Turning around, he saw a stunningly beautiful girl who turned out to be Kang Ji-jeon. Seeing such a beautiful girl, Jong Hyun immediately blushed. Kang Ji-jeon asked for his help with something, but he remembered Ji-sol's advice. When a girl initiates a conversation, there's usually a hidden agenda, possibly organ trafficking or some other scheme. So when she touched his arm, he raised his chin arrogantly and delivered a cool line. Back in the present, Jong Hyun applied the same tactic. He raised his chin and asked Kang Ji-jeon if she wanted his phone number. Surprised, Kang Ji-jeon thought to herself that she had encountered a crazy person and quickly improvised, claiming there was a cat stuck in a drain nearby and she needed help rescuing it. The atmosphere became awkward. Jong Hyun chuckled nervously and suggested she find someone else to rescue the cat. However, as he reached the intersection, someone grabbed his head from behind and delivered a blow to his stomach. It turned out Kim Jong Hyun had been waiting there, and with just one strike, Jong Hyun collapsed to the ground. He asked who had hit him, to which Kim Jong Hyun replied it didn't matter who he was, just that Jong Hyun had picked the wrong person to mess with. Standing nearby, Kang Ji-jeon chimed in, commenting on how she wasn't crazy enough to ask for the phone number of someone so dumb. Her cold words brought tears to Jong Hyun's eyes. This was the harsh reality of life. Jong Hyun had initially thought they were organ traffickers, but before he could inquire further, Kim Jong Hyun punched him again. Then, he proceeded to punch and kick him repeatedly. Kim Jong Hyun angrily told him to fight back if he could, showcasing his Jiujitsu skills that he had learned, no longer clinging to Lim Sejun like a child. His rage stemmed from being defeated by Sejun before. This outburst made Jong Hyun reflect on his past. As a child, he had no friends and was always alone, watching other kids play. In school, he was isolated and bullied. He had hoped college would be different, but it wasn't. One day, a classmate told Jong Hyun they needed his help with group assignments and PowerPoint presentations for Hajin's birthday party. Since Jong Hyun didn't drink, he couldn't attend the party, but he agreed to help with the assignments. On a cold winter day, he stumbled upon a flyer for a Jiujitsu club, which changed his life that day. Action was actually the one who distributed the flyers, inviting Jong Hyun to join the Jiujitsu club. When Jungwon asked if someone as weak as him could learn Jiujitsu, Action assured him that anyone could learn as long as they were determined. Jong Hyun tightly gripped Kim Jong Hyun's leg, telling him, "Don't think that just because you failed, others will too. Those who think that one defeat defines them are destined to remain failures. Now I'll show you that even someone who has tasted defeat can still seize victory." Kim Jong Hyun, feeling trapped, started to get frustrated. He asked the person in front of him what he was planning to do, then raised his fist, preparing to strike Jong Hyun. At that moment, Jong Hyun put one foot down and locked Kim Jong Hyun's leg, causing him to stumble. Enraged, Kim Jong Hyun attempted to overpower Jong Hyun, but Jong Hyun asked if he knew about grappling arts, where even when pinned to the ground, there's still a chance to counterattack. Before finishing his sentence, Jong Hyun pushed him, causing Kim Jong Hyun to stagger. Taking advantage of this, Jong Hyun grabbed his arm and twisted it behind him. Kim Jong Hyun, immobilized, could only curse helplessly as blood rushed to his head, his face reddening. Kim Jong Hyun shouted at Jong Hyun to release him. After a while, Kim Jong Hyun was pinned down by Jong Hyun, with both hands firmly around his neck. Kim Jong Hyun began to feel breathless. Kang Ji-jeon stood nearby, calmly watching. She pretended to ask if Kim Jong Hyun needed help, but inwardly thought differently. This Kim Jong Hyun, unable to fight against someone smaller like this, if it were in Sang-soo, it would be different. When Kim Jong Hyun heard Kang Ji-jeon offer to help, he stopped her, wanting to win this fight fair and square. Seeing Kim Jong Hyun struggle to breathe, his eyes wide and face turning pale, Jong Hyun quickly released him, advising him to stop before someone got seriously hurt. As soon as he was freed, Kim Jong Hyun seized the opportunity to punch Jong Hyun in the face. Determined not to let him go this time, Jong Hyun continued to sit on top of Kim Jong Hyun, grabbing his arm and tightening his grip around his neck. Seeing him raise his fist again, Kim Jong Hyun couldn't understand what he intended to do until he felt a sharp pain in a sensitive area. Unexpectedly, Kim Jong Hyun played dirty, aiming at a vulnerable spot. In pain, Jong Hyun clutched his lower body, rolling back and forth. Kim Jong Hyun regained his composure and stood up. Kang Ji-jeon urged him to finish it quickly, to knock out that guy's head, as Kim's manager had instructed. If they took any longer, the police would arrive. Kang Ji-jeon noticed a few empty soju bottles by a utility pole. She picked one up and handed it to Kim Jong Hyun. Suddenly, Sang-soo appeared from behind, startling Kang Ji-jeon, almost dropping the bottle on Kim Jong Hyun's head. Kang Ji-jeon asked why he was here, and Sang-soo grabbed the bottle of alcohol, saying he was worried about her safety. Even though they had broken up, his love for Ji-jeon remained unchanged, and Sang-soo spoke tearfully. Kim Jong Hyun asked where Sang-soo had been for the past few days. Their manager had been looking for him everywhere. And Sang-soo irritably told Kim Jong Hyun to shut up. No one was asking him for answers. Then, Sang-soo hugged Kang Ji-jeon tightly and said some cheesy lines he had learned. Kang Ji-jeon felt nauseated listening to him. She asked who taught him to talk like that. Obviously, it was Jo Hoin. Who else could it be? And Sang-soo and Kang Ji-jeon stood there, acting out a sweet scene, which annoyed Kim Jong Hyun. He angrily told Sang-soo to leave quickly. At that moment, Im Yong Hyun saw someone approaching him and looked up in alarm. And Sang-soo said he had called Sejun over. Upon hearing this, Kim Jong Hyun quickly assumed an attacking stance. Sejun, however, ignored him and turned to ask Jong Hyun if he was alright. Taking advantage of Sejun's distraction, Kim Jong Hyun swung his fist aggressively. Suddenly, something flew towards them, hitting Kim Jong Hyun hard in the chest, leaving him speechless. Sejun took off his hat and declared it was time to deal with pests. Kim Jong Hyun fell to his knees in pain. He couldn't understand why Sejun had become so much stronger in such a short time. Sejun remarked that not seeing him for weeks had made a difference. Kim Jong Hyun used to resemble a human being, but now he was no different from insects. Angered, Kim Jong Hyun retorted, asking Sejun if he thought he was the protagonist or something. Sejun confidently affirmed that indeed he was the protagonist. Kim Jong Hyun then devised a plan to distract Sejun, leaving him disoriented and seizing the opportunity to attack. Kim Jong Hyun began lecturing Sejun on ethics, mentioning how people like Sejun always lose because they have too much to lose. As he spoke, Kim Jong Hyun raised his fist, intending to strike Sejun's chin. However, before he could execute his dirty move, Sejun swiftly kneed him in the face, causing Kim Jong Hyun's head to slam into the wall and blood to spurt from his nose and mouth. Sejun continued his relentless assault, punching Kim Jong Hyun repeatedly in the face, rendering him unable to defend or counterattack. Despite taking consecutive blows, Kim Jong Hyun remained undaunted, laughing scornfully. At that moment, Ji-sul descended from above and accidentally kicked Kim Jong Hyun's arm, causing him to cry out in pain. Ji-sul rushed over and asked Jong Hyun if he was alright. Jong Hyun insisted he was fine, but his posture looked strange. Angered, Ji-sul turned to ask who had done this. Sejun calmly replied that he had taken care of Kim Jong Hyun, who had received a lesson in humility. Now the priority was to take Young Hyun to the hospital for a checkup. Before leaving, Sejun instructed Kim Jong Hyun to deliver a message to Manager Kim. Regardless of what play or scheme it was, Manager Kim should bring Lee Young-gold out to face him. As Sang-soo and Kang Ji-jeon departed, leaving Kim Jong Hyun sitting there in a sorry state, today's events reminded Jong-won of the first day he, Sejun, and Hajin met. Curious, Sejun asked what day that was and asked Jong-won to tell him more. Jong-won recounted how, on Jong Hyun's first day at the training room, there were many members around. Seeing Jong Hyun struggling with his belt, Jun Hyun had been the first to strike up a conversation with him, boosting Jong Hyun's confidence slightly. However, a month later, that hope was shattered. The person called Jun Hyun had revealed his true nature after being struck by Jong Hyun once. He tightly gripped Jong Hyun's neck, threatening him not to come to the training room again. Not stopping there, he also badmouthed Jong Won to others in the training room, causing everyone to avoid training with Jong Hyun. But then Seo Hajin appeared, and the two became sparring partners. A few days later, that person, Yoo Hyun, had arranged to meet Jong Hyun in an alley, where Kim Jong Hyun was attacked. Just now, feeling threatened with words not working, he resorted to physical violence against Jong Hyun. At this point, feeling powerless and unable to do anything, Jong Hyun could only shed tears. It was on that same day that Jong Hyun met Ji-sul. He witnessed 3 or 4 people bullying someone, and Ji-sul couldn't stand by, so he intervened. Hajin also appeared at that moment. Thinking Ji-sul was colluding with the bullies to bully Jong Hyun, Hajin punched him. Ji-sul was bewildered and didn't understand what was happening. Jong Hyun quickly explained that Ji-sul had just happened to pass by. Jun Hyung burst into laughter and sarcastically asked if there was a superhero meeting today, wondering why these idle troublemakers had gathered here. Seeing that they paid no heed to his words, Jun Hyung told his gang to leave. Hajin asked where they were going without even apologizing to Jong Hyun. Jun Hyung angrily approached Hajin, asking if she wanted to die with her audacious words. Suddenly, he felt a chill down his spine. Hajin laughed and said, "Did you think I was alone?" When Jun Hyung turned around, he saw Action standing there, realizing he had been there all along. Jun Hyung tried to explain hurriedly, but was swiftly gripped by Action's strong hand on his shoulder, causing him to cry out in pain. Jun Hyung's 2 cronies panicked and explained that they were just talking. After hearing this, Action squeezed Jun Hyung's shoulder harder, remarking that people like them only understood talks delivered with fists. Ji-sul looked admiringly at the person in front of him and asked Hajin who that was, impressed by his muscular physique. Proudly, Hajin said he was a trainer at her gym. If Ji-sul knew how to wrestle, he could come to their gym and try out. Aside from Jun Hyung, anyone else was welcome. Action then released Jun Hyung. Action emphasized that wrestling was for everyone, young or old, as long as they didn't demean others and arrogantly think they were superior. Jun Hyung was seething with anger, but couldn't do anything due to his painful shoulder. Action then kicked Jun Hyung out of his gym, warning him that if he ever returned, he would meet a worse fate. The incident in that alley came to an end. However, a few days later, a rumor began spreading through the neighborhood that Action had assaulted a public official outside the gym and chased him away because he didn't like him. This rumor quickly reached the ears of gym members. They gathered to confront Action and inquire about the truth. The official had allegedly demanded Action's removal or a refund for his membership. This situation put the gym manager in a difficult position. When everyone came looking for him, Action was still not awake. He was hesitant to wake up. Looking up, Action replied to everyone that those who deserved to be beaten would be. There was no justification needed for his actions. After speaking, Action lay back down to continue sleeping. Jong Hyun felt deeply guilty. He didn't want Action to be implicated. Thus, Jong Hyun cried and promised to take responsibility for everything. Hajin, furious that her friends and trainer had been wrongly accused, went to the manager and explained everything. Fortunately, the truth came to light that day. Subsequently, the manager addressed everyone in the gym. He acknowledged that while violence was wrong, in that situation, it had been necessary. He invited anyone who couldn't accept that to leave, promising a refund. In the end, almost everyone chose to leave. The manager had to find additional work outside, such as delivery jobs, to make ends meet. Jong Hyun felt deeply remorseful and went to apologize to Action. However, instead of blaming Jong Hyun, the manager took full responsibility, which moved Jong Hyun deeply. Afterward, Ji-sul also came to register for training at the gym. Despite the recent unfortunate events, Jong Hyun believed that other good fortunes and relationships would come his way. End of flashback. Jong Hyun still felt very happy to meet friends like Hajin and Ji-sul. Meanwhile, a subordinate came in to inform Director Kim that someone had arrived to see him. When the person entered, Director Kim began asking questions incessantly. How has Kim Sejun been lately? What did he do during his recovery period? The person replied, recently, Kim Sejun has been working on his lower body with action. During his rest period, he has accumulated a lot of experience to increase his strength. Director Kim suddenly asked, with Kim Sejun's current strength, can he compete with Lee Young-gold? Unexpectedly, the person visiting Director Kim was Jo Hoing. The buzz-cut man, having seen Hajin kill a prisoner like squashing an ant, felt a bit fearful. He said, Hajin is usually used to killing terrorists, but this time it was a civilian. Action and Hajin immediately showed their attitude upon hearing this. The two of them sneered and asked the buzz-cut man if he had any opinions. Then Hajin walked over to warn the buzz-cut man, if you like to say such empty moralistic phrases, then go back to your hometown to live. Hearing this, the buzz-cut man no longer dared to speak rashly. Hajin told him to go back and informed the commander that the prisoner had hugged a bomb suitcase and committed suicide. Then she turned to Action and told him to follow her, because someone named Ray wanted to see him. At this moment, a woman was sitting in a warehouse. She looked exactly like Action. It turned out that this person was Ray, and she was Action's sister. Not long after, Hajin came to inform that Action had arrived. Ray slowly opened her eyes. Action asked why she called him there. Ray said, before Action trains the team for this mission, he will get a holiday break. Besides Action, Hajin will also get to go home to rest. Ray told Action, during the break, you are not allowed to go to bars, fight civilians, or cause trouble. Hearing this, Action sighed deeply. He said, I need to spend some time for myself too. Seeing Action not listening to her, Ray knocked her head against his. Action cried out in pain. Ray announced to Action that Haley wanted to see him, so he should hurry home. Hearing the name Haley, Action said he would agree to go for that kid. A few days later, Action and Hajin both left the military to go home. As soon as he walked into the house, Action asked where Haley was. Hearing Action's voice, little Haley immediately ran down the stairs. Her mother, who was in the kitchen, scolded her for running in the house. At this moment, seeing Haley running towards him, Action happily opened his arms. He thought there would be a warm hug between them, but instead, Haley ran right past him, leaving Action standing there frozen in place. Then she quickly turned around and punched Action several times. Although these punches didn't hurt at all, Action still played along and cried out in pain. Haley started crying and scolded Action for not coming home sooner. While she was scolding him, she accidentally opened her mouth wide, revealing her missing teeth. Action struggled to hold back his laughter and finally burst out laughing. He patted Haley's head and asked her what happened to her teeth, saying she looked silly. This made Haley very angry. At this moment, Hajin, who was behind them, slapped Action and told him to stop teasing the girl. Haley quickly ran over to hug Hajin and said she missed her very much. At this point, Action's mother, Graction, came out and told Haley to go to her room and change clothes, then come down for dinner. Haley, clinging to Hajin, refused to let go and didn't want to go to her room. Hajin had no choice but to follow her upstairs, leaving Action and Ray to talk. Not long after, Ray and Action came to the living room to talk. Action couldn't believe what he had just heard. He asked Ray again if she really wanted him to leave the military after completing this last mission. Ray explained that Action was a soldier but couldn't control his emotions and often emitted negative energy towards others. Moreover, Action's team was an anti-terrorism unit tasked with tracking down targets. Ideally, Ray wanted him out of this mission, but because the real target might appear this time, she allowed Action to participate. Ray said she was truly exhausted and would probably also request to leave the military after this mission. Action disagreed with Ray. He didn't want to leave the military because he wanted to avenge their parents and eliminate all those scumbags. Besides, this was the job he loved the most, allowing him to kill those bastards legally without going to jail. Ray couldn't believe what she was hearing from her brother. Did he just admit to being someone who enjoys killing? Action laughed and said he didn't see terrorists as human beings, but as harmful insects. And as long as they were harmful insects, he would spend his entire life killing them all. Action told Ray not to interfere with his life and suggested that if she wanted, she could move to Korea with her family while he stayed here and continued his life's mission. Hearing this, Ray was furious. Action's words made it seem like he considered her family as strangers. Ray rolled up her sleeves, intending to give her rebellious brother a beating. It had been a long time since he had been hit, so he had become quite arrogant. Seeing Ray suddenly change her tone, Action became fearful. At this moment, Action's brother-in-law advised him to run away quickly, but just as he finished speaking, Ray lunged at Action. She grabbed him and pushed him down, making Action feel like the world was spinning. He angrily told Ray to let go of him. Ray began to apply her Jiujitsu techniques. Action said using Jiujitsu was pointless here because they weren't in a gym, so it wouldn't be of any use. He urged Ray to let him go, warning that if he punched her, she would surely pass out. Ray, still on top of Action, dared him to try. They wrestled back and forth until Ray gained the upper hand. She raised her fist and asked Action if he wanted to test her. Seeing his sister's fist, Action felt a bit scared. He told Ray to calm down and talk it out properly, but Ray wasn't in the mood for a calm conversation anymore. She started punching Action's face repeatedly, cursing him as a bastard. After landing a few satisfying punches, Ray softened her tone and advised Action to leave the military after this mission. She didn't want her brother to live as a revenge-driven killer. Instead, she wanted him to live a happy life with someone he loved, which would bring her peace of mind. Action lay there silently, not saying a word. At that moment, Haley ran downstairs. Seeing her mother beating her beloved uncle, she became very angry. Haley ran up and scolded her mother, asking why she was hitting him. Ray said they were just talking, but Haley didn't believe her, saying adults never talk like that. She extended her hand to help Action up. Despite being beaten, Action felt very happy seeing this scene. At that moment, he wasn't swayed by Ray's words, but fate had other plans. Violence only leads to more violence, and hatred only breeds more hatred. The only way to break this cycle is to eliminate everyone involved in it, with no exceptions. Back to the present. Jiang was trembling, cornered. He said he didn't know anything. Action told him that he was about to find out just how terrifying his madness could be. Hearing Action's words, Jiang was utterly terrified. He begged for the police to be called, saying he would reveal everything he knew and would cooperate as a witness. Action laughed and asked what Jiang was talking about. The only person who could ask questions and make demands here was Action himself. He brought an axe close to Jiang's face and told him to choose. Answer truthfully or get chopped right now. At this moment, Jung Yu found a fairly large mirror and brought it over, placing it in front of Jiang. He asked Jiang if he could see clearly. Jiang asked Action what the mirror was for. Surely it wasn't for therapy, right? Action replied that it was a bit different, but essentially the same. Then he took the axe and chopped down on Jiang's hand. Jiang screamed in pain. Action told Jiang to look at his current state in the mirror, to see and feel it with his own eyes. That was why Action called this method mirror therapy. Moments later, blood was splattered all over the warehouse. Jiang, trembling, pleaded with Action to call an ambulance. He said that if his fingers were kept intact, there might be a chance to reattach them at the hospital. But to his horror, Action stomped on Jiang's fingers, crushing them. Jiang was stunned by the sight. Jung Yu, standing next to him, exclaimed in surprise. He hadn't expected Action to leave Jiang with no way out at all. Furious, Jiang cursed Action vehemently, saying that Action should wait. He would come back and chop off all of Action's fingers. Whether that day would come was uncertain. Action then approached, grabbed Jiang's mutilated hand, and, despite Jiang struggling, brought it to the mirror, telling him to look. This was his hand that had just been chopped. Now he could no longer use his right hand. Blood continued to spurt from his fingers. Action said he would stop Jiang's hand from bleeding, and then move on to cut the fingers on his left hand, not just one but 4 at a time. Hearing this, Jung Yu covered his mouth in shock, saying that if Jiang lost both hands, he wouldn't be able to hold anything anymore. Jeong asked why he was being tortured like this, what grudge Action held against him. Action replied that there was no grudge, it was just for fun. Similar to how Jiang had come to Sejun and caused trouble. Those who participated in the attack on Hajin and those who messed with Sejun would all be dealt with. Reflecting on the past, after avenging his sister and Haley, Action had gone to Korea alone. He wanted to destroy all the gyms and defeat those skilled in Jiujitsu to prove to his sister that Jiujitsu was useless in real life. One day, Action walked into a gym and asked if anyone was there. Inside, a girl eating noodles asked whom he was looking for. Seeing the girl in front of him, Action was reminded of his niece, Haley. Suddenly, the girl yelled and said that Action was being rude for not taking off his shoes before entering. Her tone was a bit frightening to Action. It turned out to be Hajin. Action bent down to remove his shoes but suddenly collapsed. Hajin was confused and didn't know what was wrong with him. After a moment, Action clumsily got back up. Hajin asked if he was okay, and if he wanted a bowl of ramen. Action declined and said he was fine. Then, unexpectedly, he started sobbing in front of Hajin. Even though she didn't understand what was going on, Hajin patted his head to comfort him. After a while, Action regained consciousness. He saw a couple of people in front of him, but due to the backlight, he could only make out their silhouettes. He thought he might have died. When Action said something in English, Hajin was surprised. She turned to the person next to her and asked if they understood what he said. The person next to her also didn't understand. Action figured he must have dreamt of breaking some discipline too much. Suddenly, Action sprang up and accidentally cursed. The man immediately said he understood that part. Action was swearing. Hajin remarked that Action seemed surprised to wake up and find himself surrounded by people. Action asked how long he had been asleep, 5 or 10 minutes. Hajin shouted in his face that it had been 3 hours and told him to get up and leave. She had considered calling the police when she saw him unconscious, but he looked so peaceful while sleeping that she decided against it. Action then asked who the trainer of this gym was. The man said it was him and asked what Action wanted. Action said he had a request. He wanted the trainer to fight him until one of them was knocked out or lost consciousness. Hajin angrily asked if he was crazy, coming out of nowhere to challenge someone to a death match. She was about to charge at him, but the trainer held her back. The trainer said that the recent rumors about gyms were true. There was talk of a guy going around challenging people to strange fights, and today that guy had shown up here. The trainer asked Action why he wanted to fight people skilled in Jiujitsu even if they didn't want to. Was it because he had some grudge against Jiujitsu? Action hesitated, not answering. In truth, he didn't hate Jiujitsu. It was just that his sister had always said Jiujitsu was very useful in life, and Action wanted to prove her wrong. He felt that if he couldn't prove it, he would have no reason to keep living. While Action wasn't paying attention, the coach rushed forward and punched him in the face. Action wondered why Jiu-Jitsu started with a punch. The coach explained that because the distance was too far to grapple, it had to start with a punch instead of charging in. Then the coach sat down and asked Action if he wanted to continue fighting or have a little chat. Action was stunned after hearing this. After such a long time, finally, someone made Action not want to fight anymore. A kind person moved Action. Afterward, he asked the coach if he could live there. Months passed, and Action truly considered the gym his home. One day, Ji-Sol ran back, informing the gym manager that Hajin had been attacked. She was currently in the ICU. Although the surgery was successful, Hajin had not yet regained consciousness. The manager was shocked upon hearing this and turned to ask Action if he knew about it. At that moment, Action was on the phone with someone, seemingly having found the bastards who had beaten Hajin. On that same day, Action met Sejun. In the evening, in a deserted alley, Ki Seok was beating Sejun, while also body-shaming him. The surrounding kids were cheering him on. Suddenly, Action appeared right behind them, startling everyone. Sejun, seeing someone approaching, tried to see who it was. Meanwhile, in a warehouse, Jungyu was holding Jiang's hand and mocking him. Earlier, Jungyu had bandaged Jiang to stop the bleeding, but due to lack of expertise, Jung-yu feared Jiang might go into shock. Action told him to ignore it. They needed to hurry and cut off Jiang's toes before he passed out. Action then told Jung-yu to hold Jiang's right foot. Jung-yu quickly obeyed. Jiang, terrified, begged Action to stop and promised to tell him everything he knew. Jiang actually knew all about Han Jung-yu, but demanded proper first aid before revealing anything. Action threatened him to talk or lose his toes. Jung-yu asked Action if he should take off Jiang's shoe, making it easier to cut. Action agreed, saying he would aim for the middle of his foot, which sounded painful. Jiang panicked and pleaded with Action to spare him. Seeing Action raise an axe, Jiang hurriedly said that Han Jung-yu had once been on the national team, representing the country in national Jiujitsu competitions. Satisfied with the answer, Action did not cut Jiang's foot. Action asked why someone like Han Jung-yu, who represented the country in national competitions, would resort to such dirty tricks. Jiang said he didn't know, but the first time he met Han Jung-yu was at an open martial arts tournament. According to what Jiang had heard, Han Jung-yu had an accident while on the national Jiu-Jitsu team, was banned from competing forever, and switched to free fighting. Jiang didn't know what exactly happened in the Jiu-Jitsu team, but Han Jung-yu had a strong hatred for those who used drugs. Han Jung-yu didn't last long in the MMA circuit either because he defeated every opponent and became the MMA god, but eventually had to retire. Jiang revealed that it was Han Jung-yu who caused the injury to his left eye, which forced Jiang to retire. He then turned to selling performance-enhancing drugs at exorbitant prices. One day, Chief Kim came to him with an offer to run a drug manufacturing plant. The hefty pay enticed Jiang to agree immediately. However, when he met Han Jung-yu again, Jiang recognized him right away. Even though Jiang didn't like Han Jung-yu, he decided to take advantage of the immediate profit. Gradually, Han Jung-yu began exhibiting strange behaviors. He gathered many high school delinquents and let them fight among themselves. Among these delinquents, a few were chosen to test a new drug. First, they would get the kids addicted to the drug, then lock them in an inescapable dungeon. Once they were addicted, they would beg for the drug and become the most loyal dogs. Jiang recounted this with great excitement. Listening to this, Action got irritated and punched him. Jong-ho asked Action why he hit Jiang, saying now Jiang couldn't answer any more of their questions. Action replied that it was fine. He had already obtained the necessary information. Now, they just needed to call the police to clean up the place. At this moment, Officer Jiang was standing outside, waiting for a long time without seeing Action come out. He thought Action must have been beaten down. Suddenly, a voice behind him startled Officer Jiang. It was Han Jung-yu. Han Jung-yu asked what Officer Jiang was doing there. After Jiang fainted, Jung-yu took out his phone and quickly called the police, pretending to be panicked, saying that there was a madman in the warehouse with a weapon, trying to kill people. Jung-yu also asked the police to send an ambulance, claiming he was severely injured and only had his thumb left. At the police station, after locating Jung-yu, the police said they would head there immediately. Meanwhile, two other officers walked in and asked the chief what was happening. Unexpectedly, the chief said it was nothing major, just a call from that warehouse. Hearing the phrase "that warehouse," the two officers' faces turned pale. They asked if those people were trying to escape again. The chief replied that it wasn't a lie, just a patrol report from the area. The two officers sighed in relief, so the police station didn't send anyone to the warehouse. Meanwhile, Han Jung-yu had recognized Officer Jiang. Most of the people in the police station had been bribed by him, except for Officer Jiang, the last upright officer of this era. Officer Jiang was surprised that this person knew his name and quickly turned to ask who he was. Han Jung-yu didn't answer but gave a thumbs up to Officer Jiang. Han Jung-yu said he admired Officer Jiang for daring to use the law to catch bad guys, comparing him to a dark knight. But then Han Jung-yu suddenly laughed and asked if Officer Jiang still thought they didn't have a plan. Han Jung-yu mocked him, saying that a simple emergency call asking the police to check the scene was too naive. While the two were talking, one of Han Jung-yu's subordinates was standing right behind Officer Jiang. Distracted by Han Jung-yu, Officer Jiang didn't notice his surroundings. Then, a plastic bag was suddenly pulled over Officer Jiang's head, and the subordinate kicked his leg, making him kneel. The subordinate pulled the bag tighter, making it hard for Officer Jiang to breathe. He didn't expect these thugs to even intend to kill a cop. As he was suffocating, Officer Jiang tried to poke a hole near his mouth to breathe, but Han Jung-yu stopped him. Officer Jiang's body trembled, too weak to push Han Jung-yu away. Han Jung-yu asked Officer Jiang if he knew why righteous and moral people in this world were gradually disappearing. He explained that there are two types of people in this world: those who understand their place and submit to the strong, and those who don't know their place and must disappear forever. As he spoke, Han Jung-yu punched Officer Jiang several times in the face. Then, Han Jung-yu ordered his subordinate to take Officer Jiang into their warehouse. Inside, Jung-yu was growing impatient as he waited for Officer Jiang to arrive. He asked Action to try calling Officer Jiang. Action felt something was wrong and decided to search the nearby area to see if he could find anything useful. Soon, Action discovered the drug production area, where a few men were still standing. Jung-yu eagerly asked if they should take them all down right away. Action replied that it wasn't necessary. These men were just waste about to be disposed of. Since they weren't sober, they could simply subdue and knock them out. Jung-yu quickly went to carry out the order. Meanwhile, Action had been trying to call Officer Jiang, but couldn't reach him. This time, the call went through, but it wasn't Officer Jiang who answered. Han Jung-yu's voice came through, asking if Action had found anything yet. He reminded Action that he had warned him before, but Action didn't listen. This time, Han Jung-yu intended to show Action that he had messed with the wrong person. Outside the gym, Kim Jong-hyun was holding a knife. It was his first time about to kill someone, and he felt nervous. The gym manager suddenly appeared behind him, Kim Young-hyun, and told him to drop the knife before he got angry. A few days ago, Chief Kim had called Kim Jong-hyun to meet with him. He said that the situation had drastically changed. Lim Sejun and the people around him had far exceeded his expectations, and their current level seemed very high. Therefore, they needed to quickly come up with a way to handle this situation and be prepared for them. Chief Kim instructed Kim Jong-hyun to find Kang Ji-jeon, who might be hiding somewhere with An Chang-sidu. Finding them was just a matter of time. If Kim Jong-hyun succeeded in finding Kang Ji-jeon, Chief Kim would give him a worthy reward. Chief Kim said the task was simple. Kim Jong-hyun just needed to go to the gym and kill anyone he saw. Kim Jong-hyun hesitated, as he found this beyond his imagination and needed time to think about the proposal. Chief Kim stressed that this was an urgent mission. So Kim Jong-hyun had to decide immediately: either accept, follow the orders, and have a better future, or refuse and face prison once he matured. Currently, Chief Kim had enough evidence to put Kim Jong-hyun behind bars. Hearing Chief Kim's words, Kim Jong-hyun was terrified, and it wasn't hard to guess what he would choose. Action asked Han Jung-yu how Officer Jiang was doing. Han Jung-yu told Action not to worry. He hadn't killed Officer Jiang. They were just having a conversation, though it was a one-sided conversation where one person spoke while the other got punched. Han Jung-yu asked why Action had lied, saying that because Action didn't follow his advice, he had sent someone to the gym who would kill everyone he saw there. Han Jung suggested that Action should return to save everyone. Action asked if Han Jung-yu had sent 10 men with knives, saying that if it was only 1 or 2 guys, the gym manager could easily handle them. Action declared that he wasn't going back now that he was already there. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-hyun suddenly heard a voice behind him, startling him. He turned around and loudly asked who it was. Hearing this kid address him so rudely, the manager got a bit angry and asked Kim Jong-hyun why he dared to speak so disrespectfully to an elder. Kim Jong-hyun suddenly went mad, raised the knife to threaten the manager, and then tried to stab him. However, he'd only managed to stab a hat, while the manager had somehow appeared beside him and punched him. Kim Jong-hyun clutched his face in pain, wondering who this old man was. He realized the man knew boxing, but probably specialized in Jiujitsu. Kim Jong-hyun then asked if the man wanted to join the gym. The manager confirmed, saying he hadn't been able to spar recently, so he was a bit slow. Seeing the knife stuck in the hat on the ground, Kim Jong-hyun planned to distract the old man and quickly pick up the knife. He got into an attacking stance, planning to kick the old man and grab the knife, but it was easier said than done. Before Kim Jong-hyun could launch an attack, the manager suddenly struck from behind, delivering a punch to his side, causing immense pain. The manager said he didn't like using his fists to resolve issues, but sometimes had no choice, especially with those who played around with others' lives. If these people weren't eliminated, they would continue to harm innocent people. Meanwhile, Officer Jiang was being stomped on the head by Han Jung-yu. At this moment, Action and Jung-yu also arrived at the scene. Han Jung-yu summoned his burly subordinates, declaring that today he would show Action what a real fight was. Han Jung-yu asked if Action was ready, and if he needed a reminder of the rules. Jung-yu quickly interjected, saying it was okay. They didn't need a reminder, and they should just start fighting. Action instructed Jung-yu that it was okay to kill those men, but the top priority was to protect Officer Jiang. Initially, Jung-yu disagreed, stating that he wasn't good at saving people and was better at causing destruction. Action warned him not to make him call Seo Hajin. At the mention of Jiang Jin, Jung-yu was terrified and reluctantly agreed, saying that sometimes being a good person might not be too bad. He then approached two of the thugs, telling them to move aside so he could handle the situation. The leader of the thugs saw the young-looking kid in front of him and was very disdainful. He asked Jung-yu if they were on the same side as the people inside. Jung-yu suggested they settle this quickly. Angered by Jung-yu's provocation, the leader ordered his two subordinates to attack Jung-yu simultaneously. Jung-yu, sticking his tongue out in a mocking gesture, provoked them further. As the three thugs charged at Jung-yu, their sticks broke in half upon striking him. Jung-yu neither dodged nor blocked, yet he felt no pain. The thugs were stunned, realizing the boy in front of them was definitely not ordinary. Jung-yu glanced at them and said, "Since you hit me first, now it's my turn." He then punched the leader, who quickly collapsed. Seeing this, one thug told the other to grab a knife. The other refused and they started shoving each other. Jung-yu taunted them to hit him to see who would be the next to fall. One thug covered his face with his hands, but Jung-yu attacked his weak spot instead. The impact was so severe that something broke with an audible crack, leaving the thug paralyzed with pain. Even Han Jung-yu winced at the sight. Action interrupted, telling them to stop wasting time and get straight to the point. At this moment, a thug behind wielded a bat, intending to sneak attack Action, but Action quickly sensed it. He turned around and kicked him in the lower body, causing the thug to cry out in pain. Jun, watching, remarked that now the real villain was revealed. Jung-yu turned and told Tao that this wretch deserved it. Suddenly, an iron rod struck Jung-yu hard on the head. The thug asked if he could withstand another hit this time. Blood flowed from Jung-yu's head as he questioned why the thug would do such a thing. The thug was amazed that Jung-yu could take such a blow without falling. He intended to strike Jung-yu again, but before he could, he received a punch and an iron rod to his fake nose, likely breaking it. Then Jung-yu punched the thug to the ground with such force that the ground cracked. Jung-yu realized he could no longer control his strength. He turned to ask Action for help. At that moment, Action was being restrained by another thug, but he remained calm and instructed Jung-yu to quickly call the police and Jiang to the hospital. The thug advised Action to worry about himself first, being immobilized. Action, unexpectedly, swiftly escaped the hold and counterattacked, breaking the thug's arm. He cried out in pain. The remaining thug raised his bat to attack, but Jung-yu threw an iron rod from afar, hitting him on the head. The thug immediately collapsed unconscious. Jung-yu told Action to take Jian to the hospital first, and the others would be left for Action to handle. Action declared that today, someone between him and Han Jung-yu would die. Han Jung-yu replied calmly, willing to comply, but he did not anticipate that Action was quite clever and couldn't be fooled by cheap traps. Moreover, Action had come prepared and brought capable people with him. Therefore, Han Jung-yu reconsidered his intentions, knowing that Action was a reliable pillar among those around him. And if that pillar fell, everything else would collapse. Han Jung-yu was determined to bring down the entire pillar. Han Jung-yu wants to bring down the whole pillar, Action said. He doubted Han Jung-yu's ability to do so. People like Han Jung-yu only like to demand their mother's embrace when they sleep, Action sneered, but Han Jung-yu remained unfazed. The scariest aren't the hot-headed ones, but those who conceal their emotions inside. Inside, Han Jung-yu told Action not to joke like that anymore. I'm not happy, Action said, claiming he didn't say anything offensive. Was it because he mentioned Han Jung-yu's mother? That made him angry. Just hearing Action mention his mother, Han Jung-yu immediately struck. He kicked Action in the head, but Action managed to block it with his hand. It was a high kick. Han Jung-yu didn't even need to prepare and still managed to deliver. Indeed, it was terrifying. Seeing Action's surprised face, Han Jung-yu asked him why. Did Action really think he was just a playboy? Since their days of fighting at the academy, Han Jung-yu already knew Action. Action said Han Jung-yu looked too much like a playboy, so he misunderstood. But he couldn't deny that Han Jung-yu was stronger than he thought. Then Han Jung-yu rushed to attack Action continuously, catching him off guard so that Action could only block with his hands. Han Jung-yu asked Action if he knew the difference between a real battle and just fighting. Even if Action was a soldier who had killed people, he couldn't defeat Han Jung-yu, a martial arts master who graduated from the National Academy. Action thought Han Jung-yu's fighting style would mainly use acrobatic moves, but Han Jung-yu focused on a series of punches. At this point, seeing Action only blocking without attacking, Han Jung-yu sneered. He asked if Action didn't have a weapon, so he couldn't fight. Or was Action analyzing his fighting style? Han Jung-yu regretted that he was famous for not having a distinctive fighting style. Then Han Jung-yu quickly moved next to Action, surprising him with his movement because he had never seen this before. Han Jung-yu said until now was just the warm-up, now he would get to the main story. Suddenly, Action spat in Han Jung-yu's face, making him unable to dodge. Action said people like Han Jung-yu who dared to teach him how to fight and fight differently. How would he teach Han Jung-yu what fighting and war were? At the entrance of the training room, Kim Jong-hyun and the manager were arguing. Kim Jong-hyun said, "In this era, it's all about deceit and selfishness. Only the selfish ones survive. As long as his life goes smoothly, that's all that matters. Why should he care about others' lives?" The manager retorted that he was just using those evil thoughts to cover up his own wrongdoings. Kim Jong-hyun asked the manager if he knew who the real villain was. The manager didn't understand what this madman was talking about. Kim Jong-hyun continued, "Today, Action didn't come to the training room because he's facing a monster." Hearing this, the manager calmly said he didn't care. Kim Jong-hyun was stunned. He said that he wasn't joking and that Action might die. The manager couldn't hold back his laughter. He said that while he didn't know about others, Action was definitely the dirtiest among the people he knew. Meanwhile, in the warehouse, Han Jung-yu had been punched by Action, causing his nose to bleed. Han Jung-yu didn't expect Action to play dirty like that. Action said he didn't want to die. Normally, people would lose their fighting spirit if faced with weapons like guns. But in a hand-to-hand combat, nobody wants to be beaten to death, especially those who have experienced war firsthand. Action asked Han Jung-yu if he wanted to know the difference for those who hadn't experienced war. Han Jung said he didn't know. Action said that's because those who have will always carry a weapon with them. Then, Action took off his shirt and threw it towards Han Jung-yu. Han Jung-yu thought Action was trying to blind him with this move, but when the shirt flew, Han Jung-yu saw a knife stuck in his leg. Suddenly, Han Jung-yu's past reversed to when he was young, living in a luxurious mansion as an illegitimate child. His half-brother and father didn't like him. One day, his half-brother brought a knife in front of Han Jung-yu. Han Jung-yu asked his half-brother why he brought that. His half-brother hated Han Jung-yu, calling him brother because Han Jung-yu was the son of his father and a lover. His half-brother cursed Han Jung-yu as a dirty burden, better off not being born. Seeing his half-brother curse him like that, Han Jung-yu trembled with fear. He said from now on he wouldn't dare to call him brother again. His half-brother asked Han Jung-yu if he knew why he lived in this house. It was because his existence and his mother were just like toilet paper, only to wipe their father and son's ass. The filthy things in this house are all he needs to clean. Then his half-brother told Han Jung-yu to take off his pants. He said every time he was unhappy, he would use Han Jung-yu's body to vent. At that time, Han Jung-yu was still young and only knew how to cry and call his mother. His brother was cruel and abused him. After that, Han Jung-yu went to tell his mother, but she didn't care and slapped Han Jung-yu. She warned him that if he didn't want to live on the street, he should bear it until he was old enough to fight back. After that, Han Jung-yu touched the spot where his mother had just hit him. He shed no tears. Perhaps the spiritual pain was greater than physical pain. After entering the room, Han's mother trembled and sat down. She couldn't help crying. Back to the present, blood from Han Jung-yu's thigh trickled down to the ground. He sneered at Action, asking why he had to use weapons. No, Action replied. He said he would only teach him how to fight with his hands, not on the battlefield. Action thought to himself, is this guy crazy? Currently, Han Jung-yu has a knife stuck in his thigh, yet he remains indifferent. If he were an ordinary person, he would have screamed in pain by now. But Han Jung-yu is different. Seeing Han Jung-yu about to pull out the knife, Action immediately steps forward and stomps on it harder, driving the knife deeper into Han Jung-yu's leg. Han Jung-yu is finally feeling the intense pain, yelling out loudly before collapsing to the ground. Han Jung-yu remarks how genuinely painful it is this time, not joking at all. But then suddenly he bursts into laughter. Action, perplexed, looks at this multifaceted individual on the ground. Han Jung-yu asks Action if he doesn't find this situation amusing, even seeming to enjoy turning out this way. Challengingly, Han Jung-yu asks Action what he plans to do now. Without saying much, Action kicks Han Jung-yu aside. Meanwhile, Jong-ho calmly brings Officer Jiang to the hospital. Suddenly, Officer Jiang wakes up startled, nearly punching Jong-ho. Officer Jiang questions where they are, and what about Action? Jong-ho informs Officer Jiang that Action is handling the ringleader now, and they are on their way to the hospital for treatment. However, Officer Jiang refuses. He insists on returning there because Action has been deceived. That Han Jung-yu guy intended to set a trap a few hours ago, when Officer Jiang was still with Han Jung-yu. Back then, Officer Jiang continued to threaten Han Jung-yu loudly, warning him to quickly kill himself or he would be punished. Excitedly hearing Officer Jiang's threat, Han Jung-yu admires Officer Jiang's sense of justice in such circumstances. Officer Jiang remains steadfast in his principles. Yet, despite being a police officer, he is just a small one. If he disappears, his case will only be investigated for a short time and then remain unsolved. Han Jung-yu says that this time he will exploit Officer Jiang for his own plan. If they want Action to be alone, they need to separate Action and the officer accompanying him. Initially, Han Jung-yu will let the accompanying officer go with Action to take Officer Jiang to the hospital first. Officer Jiang interrupts him, asking Han Jung-yu if he thinks it will be easy to follow. Han Jung-yu laughs, saying that if Officer Jiang doesn't follow, he will be transferred to work as a local traffic cop. Furthermore, Officer Jiang has been to the crime scene several times and dared to collaborate with the former U.S. soldier. Just these facts are enough to send Officer Jiang to jail. For those without power, no matter how hard they try, they can't change anything. After saying this, Han Jung-yu punches Officer Jiang. At this moment, a police officer aims a stun gun at Action and orders him to raise his hands, demanding that Action release Han Jung-yu. Action turns around and asks them directly what they want. Should he raise his hands or release Han Jung-yu? He scolds them for being late, thinking they were the police Han Jung-yu called. Han Jung-yu explains that the police are here to arrest Action for trespassing on private property, weapon assault, and conspiracy to commit murder. Action is stunned by these accusations. Another officer fires the stun gun at Action, but he swiftly grabs Han Jung-yu by the head and throws him in the line of fire. Han Jung-yu ends up taking the shock himself, writhing in pain on the ground. Another officer tells the one who fired to stop the stun gun. The confused officer asks where to turn it off. Action remarks that people like them he prefers not to dirty his hands with, but if not eradicated, they will continue to spread and harm others. He pulls out his axe, and the two officers become frightened, urging Action to drop it. He challenges them back, asking what will happen if he doesn't. Even though they are police officers, if they are not on the side of justice, they deserve to be dealt with like anyone else. Action approaches the two officers with his axe, causing them to panic and flee in disarray. Turning back to Han Jung-yu, Action asks if this was the trap he set, noting how easily they were scared off. Han Jung-yu, still recovering on the ground, curses at the two officers for their incompetence. Action then lifts one of Han Jung-yu's legs and drags him away. He mentions finding several interesting things in the building's basement and leaving a few surprises behind. After making a call on his phone, Han Jung-yu asks who Action called. Action mocks him for thinking it's the police and explains it's a remote detonation. Suddenly, Han Jung-yu's drug warehouse explodes into dust. Shocked and bewildered, Han Jung-yu sees everything he had vanish overnight. Trembling, he asks Action if he realizes what he's done. Action confidently admits to planting a bomb in the drug cartel's hideout and setting it off in front of its creator. Enraged, Han Jung-yu vows that Action will regret his actions. Before he can finish, Action walks away. Han Jung-yu demands to know where Action is going, insisting he hasn't finished speaking. Action coolly replies he needs to leave before the police arrive. He challenges Han Jung-yu to do whatever he wants for revenge, because he's prepared for anything that comes his way. With that, he departs. The next day, news breaks that a former U.S. soldier set fire to a warehouse and escaped, making headlines. Han Jung-yu's stepfather and mother learn about this, prompting Han Jung-yu to burst into laughter, jubilant and exclaiming that it serves them right. At this moment, Secretary Kang heard a scream, so she hurriedly ran in from outside. The deputy director asked her why she came in. Secretary Kang explained that she thought the scream was calling her, hence she entered. The deputy director angrily scolded Secretary Kang and then instructed her to call Officer Tony Park from the police station over here. Over here, Police Officer Jiang was being reprimanded by his superiors. They asked him where Action, a former U.S. soldier, was located. Despite the questioning, Officer Jiang remained silent about Action's whereabouts. That night, he just happened to pass by a warehouse and saw a gang of hoodlums fighting, so he intervened to stop them. His superior, furious, told Officer Jiang that Han Jung-yu had already confessed everything, so he shouldn't lie. The superior demanded evidence that Officer Jiang colluded with the soldiers and evidence that Action set the warehouse on fire. Officer Jiang stated his superiors could punish him however they saw fit, but now he would go home to eat and rest as he pleased. Officer Jiang's demeanor further angered his superiors. In the evening, Hajin hurriedly left the gym, standing at the door and looking around as if searching for something. At that moment, a man with a rough face approached and handed Hajin a phone, saying Action was looking for her, since he couldn't show up himself right now, so he asked him to help relay the message. Hajin took the phone and asked if Action was okay now. The police were actively searching for him. Accent replied that he was fine but would disappear for a while, and the man delivering the phone would protect Hajin during this time. Personally chosen by Action himself, so Hajin didn't need to worry. Action promised he wouldn't let Hajin and Sejun face danger again. The next day, everyone in the gym learned about Action's situation. The manager couldn't believe Action could do such things because he knew Action wasn't someone who acted arbitrarily. Ji-sul was excited to learn that Action was a former U.S. soldier. He thought Action was very cool. Ji-sul asked the manager if he knew Action's true identity before. The manager said he didn't know and didn't want to pry into others' pasts when they didn't want to talk about it. Now they should worry about Action's situation rather than discussing it. Jung-yu heard Hajin recounting that Action called her and said he was okay. He would hide for a while to let things settle down. Here, Officer Na called Officer Jiang out to talk. Officer Na asked if Officer Jiang was okay. Officer Jiang said he was fine and apologized for acting alone. Officer Na reassured him it was okay, but next time, he should call for backup rather than facing trouble alone. Officer Jiang insisted he had no choice. Officer Na still had a family to take care of. Officer Na firmly stated he would rather be an honest cop than a coward just to keep his position. At this moment, Han Jung-yu was at the hospital and called Manager Kim in to discuss strategies. Manager Kim said he needed to handle urgent matters first, and in the meantime, he would temporarily establish another pharmaceutical factory. Suddenly, the door of the hospital room opened, and Manager Kim mistook the person entering for a bodyguard, so he turned around to reprimand him. To his surprise, it was a foreign man who promptly punched Manager Kim. Han Jung-yu, bewildered, asked who the man was. Just then, the deputy director walked in from outside and asked Han Jung-yu if he was surprised. He introduced the man as his newly hired bodyguard. The deputy director mocked Han Jung-yu as a failure and added that his mother in heaven would be very disappointed. Han Jung-yu urged him to get to the point without beating around the bush. The deputy director said he was here today to relay the chairman's message, who wanted Han Jung-yu to prove the effectiveness of the new drug he was holding. Han Jung-yu must demonstrate to please the executives, whether by testing it on himself or on Lim Sejun, but they needed to see how effective the drug truly was. Han Jung-yu, furious after hearing this, shouted to know where Lim Sejun was. At that moment, Sejun was at the boxing club with Jo Hoin. Jo Hoin remarked that Sejun had improved significantly lately, but still wasn't capable enough to defeat Han Jung-yu. With action absent, if Sejun got injured in such a daring fight, Hajin would be devastated. Jo Hoin advised Sejun to leave this matter to the police, but Sejun insisted he had seen those thugs looking for trouble at the gym to find Hajin. He vowed to make them pay and never dare to approach Hajin again. While they were talking, Jo Hoin suddenly changed his demeanor, looking fearful behind Sejun. Sejun asked what was happening. At this moment, a girl walked in and greeted the two. It turned out to be our beautiful sister, Seo Hajin. Sejun turned to ask Jo Hoin who she was, but before Jo Hoin could respond, Hajin interjected. She said they would get to know each other slowly. A few days ago at the port, Action had met Hajin again. Action asked her when she returned to Korea. He thought he wouldn't see Hajin again when he left. Hajin sarcastically asked if they were very close, pointing out that Action only called her when he needed something. Hajin asked what Action wanted this time. Action said he needed her help to find someone who could protect Hajin because she was always a target. Someone like Jung-yu from last time would be ideal. Hajin dismissed Jung-yu, but said she would send another tall and strong person. Action also asked Hajin for another favor that only she could do, to train Lim Sejun. Hearing Sejun's name made Hajin's eyes light up. She asked what exactly Action wanted her to teach Sejun. Action replied that she needed to teach Sejun to fight not just with martial arts, but with his life on the line. Back to the present, Hajin asked Sejun if he was practicing sandbag punching. Sejun was surprised that the girl in front of him knew his name and asked how she knew him. Hajin confidently said of course she knew him well and even knew a lot about him. If Sejun wanted to kill someone, he needed more than just martial arts training. At that moment, the boxing club's coach came over and asked Jo Hoin who the girl was and if he knew her. Jo Hoin said they were acquainted, but was sure that she was very intimidating. Hajin turned back to the coach and asked if she could use the gym after closing time, willing to pay extra for the full training. The coach asked Hajin what she needed the gym for, but instead of explaining, Hajin handed him an envelope. Sejun was now bewildered, not understanding what was happening. Hajin explained that Action had asked her to take care of this. After hearing this, Sejun immediately asked her where Action was now and if he was okay. Hajin laughed and assured Sejun that Action was fine and didn't need to worry. Now Sejun needed to worry about himself. Sejun didn't understand why Hajin said he should worry about himself. Hajin stated she wasn't as kind-hearted as Action. Even if Sejun was a teenager, she wouldn't go easy on him. Sejun didn't care who the girl was, but because Action had requested it, he would do it no matter what. Hajin remarked that Sejun was quite like Action, strong and determined. Then Sejun asked Hajin what she intended to teach him. Right now, he really wanted to beat up Han Jung-yu as soon as possible. Hajin said that Han Jungyu had a broken leg at the moment and needed time to recover. Sejun was delighted to hear that Han Jungyu had a broken leg and asked Hajin why they didn't take advantage of the opportunity to beat him up now. Hajin said she also wanted that very much, but Action didn't allow it. Action only asked Hajin to train Sejun into a true fighter. Hajin then revealed she had arranged for someone to spar with Sejun, and that person would arrive soon. Just as she finished speaking, that person arrived and suddenly threw 2 fingers forward to attack Sejun. Sejun quickly dodged to the side. The person commented that Sejun's reflexes weren't bad, but the next step would test his endurance, then punched Sejun. At this moment, the hood of the coat fell down, revealing a familiar figure, the coach. Seeing Jungyu punching Sejun forcefully, the coach was about to intervene, but Hajin held him back, stating that this was necessary for Sejun. Jungyu continued his relentless assault on Sejun. Unable to endure any longer, Sejun retaliated, but his punch was blocked and he received another blow from Jungyu. Dazed from the continuous strikes, Sejun staggered and couldn't maintain his balance, swaying back and forth. Suddenly, Jungyu swiftly closed in, delivering a powerful uppercut to Sejun's face, causing him to collapse to the ground. Hajin approached Sejun and asked if he wanted to stop training now, pointing out that it would only get harder from here. Unexpectedly, Sejun lay on the ground with a smile, saying he had found what he was looking for, someone to truly fight him, regardless of whether he was injured or not.